Hello, fellow lighthouse keepers and snake oil salesmen. Welcome back to Dragonspotting, the podcast where we consume media about dragons and then talk about it a little bit. I'm Diana, pronouns they, Annie.
I'm Heather. I'm a she-they kind of gal.
And this week, we are discussing a movie that is beloved to me from my childhood. That, of course, being 1977's Pete's Dragon, made and released by the Walt Disney Company. Because, hey, this is our first Disney movie, pals. We're finally doing it.
Yeah, we're finally coming into the House of Mouse over here. And
Yeah,
you
with your.
mentioned that this movie is very near and dear to your heart from your childhood. I have a very different relationship with this movie regarding my
Yeah?
childhood. And
Yeah?
before we get into it, if I can just establish that context real quick.
Yeah, I think you should. I would like, I'll just say this was my favorite movie growing up. I had it on constantly all the time. I wore out the VHS for it. I love this movie a lot, and while my opinion is not so starry-eyed and bright, I did find this to be an enjoyable experience this time around.
So I hated this movie as a child. And to be perfectly honest, I have, well, at least before I rewatched it with you, Diana, I had no idea why. I had no recollection, blah, no recollection in my brain as to why I felt so strongly about this movie. But when I look at Pete's Dragon, like the actual character of Pete's Dragon, I was filled with such an indescribable foundational contempt. It was
Uh-huh.
so deeply ingrained in my soul. I would feel genuine anger when I looked at this thing. And I was so confused because I had no idea why. I went looking for our old VHS copy of it when we were discussing how we were going to watch this. And when I was talking to my mom about how we were going to watch this and where we had the VHS and if we still had it, we didn't. But my mom offered the insight of, oh, yeah, I remember you always hated that movie. I have no idea why. So coming into this movie was really interesting to me because for some reason, a part of my soul had been etched with a hatred for it that was entirely foreign to me because it was beyond my capacity to remember its origin.
Yeah.
So I was
And how?
primed to dislike this movie going into it, but I carried with that a strange kind of curiosity. I felt like I was delving into an old tomb.
And are you ready to reveal how you feel after watching it, or do you want to save that for when we get into it?
I think I'll just say straight up, I understand why I did not care for this movie as a child, but I have grown to have a new sort of fondness for this movie. In a unique and more mature way of, oh, this wasn't that bad actually.
Crazy enough, I do think that at least for the first time in a couple of episodes, this movie has one of our more like positive associations at this point. Like we enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, it had more fun moments, I should say, than the last one we did at the very
For sure.
least.
For sure.
Episode
Yeah.
3 out now.
Like this is weirdly enough one of possibly the most competent movie just kind of front to back that we've watched.
I'm
Just
curious about that because you did tell me there's some stories of the production.
oh yeah, there's I mean, this is a Walt Disney Productions movie. Though none of those get away unscathed from my understanding of how things typically
Yeah.
go at that
And
company.
and for those of you unfamiliar with Pete's Dragon, this movie does contain an animated component. This is kind of a Who Framed Roger Rabbit situation where it's live action footage with animation composited over top of it to look like it's, part of the scenery.
Yes.
Specifically, the character of Pete's dragon is fully traditionally animated. If the production of our last animated feature is anything to go off of, that can cause some problems.
Oh, absolutely. I do want to, before we get into the production history, because we're gonna get into that. I
Oh
want to give
boy.
just a brief summary of this movie because I don't know if we've really done that yet, and I want to just establish a baseline for what this movie is.
Okay. Prime us
Yeah.
going in.
So you're following a young boy named Pete, and he has a dragon, Pete's dragon, named Elliot. And content warning right off the bat, this movie has a weird amount of child abuse in it. Like that's kind of the central through
Yeah,
line
to
is
be
this
fair, I don't know if it's that weird for a Disney movie of this
it
era.
for no, it's the 70s at this point. They're starting to not treat children weird anymore. Like Pinocchio was 20 years ago at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I do
So,
forget how fucking old Disney is.
yeah, I think this movie feels older than it is because it looks really bad. And that's
Yeah,
something that we're going to talk about. Like
the
every
call.
single rip that we found, including the official 2009 high flying edition DVD, which we took out from the library and got some background production history from, even that looks terrible. It's really grainy, it's really washed out. The costuming is also period accurate to the time that it was set in, which is like the early 19th century or early 20th century, excuse me. And so I think that also adds to the fact that it just feels really old. And so you kind of forget that it was released in 1977, which, hey, I watched the Rocky Horror Picture Show like the same week that we watched this together. It looks decades newer than this movie. It's kind of wild, especially considering that's a Disney movie, and in general, you expect there to be some kind of quality control at that company specifically.
Yeah, this movie's got some dust on it.
Yeah, I wonder
This
if
movie, moths flutter out of it when you open it up. It's got
it's true.
cobwebs.
Yeah. I don't think I finished giving my summary of this movie, which is fun.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry, go ahead. You were talking about this boy Pete with a dragon named Elliot and how there's child abuse in it.
this boy Pete, his dragon name Elliot, he runs away from the abusive family who purchased him for money. Weird. And he runs
Well, he
away to
was
this
an
small
orphan.
town. Sure, but I don't think you expect children to be
I
purchased
know.
for money.
I know.
He's purchased for money. He runs away with the help of his dragon, who he loves. They love each other very much. And he comes to this small town where he's taken in by a lighthouse keeper. But oh no, is his dragon going to be discovered because he doesn't Pete keeps telling his dragon to be invisible because the dragon can be invisible, by the way. That's an important aspect of this movie. The dragon is invisible for most of it. And when he's not invisible, he's this animated, goofy looking dragon motherfucker.
Mhm.
And the entire conflict of the movie up until a certain point is, will Elliot be found out? But also Pete talks about him all the time, despite the fact that he was the one who told Elliot to stay invisible. Heather, I'm
Yeah,
beginning to think that I misdescribed this movie when I called it competent.
and I
Yeah.
would say the conflict is. It's
The
hard to
conflict
call it.
evolves.
Yeah, it's hard to call it conflict because it's very low stakes for a good chunk of the movie.
Yeah, up until a snake oil salesman decides that he's gonna kill the dragon and take it apart for parts.
Yeah, it is interesting to front load this summary because we're not going to get into the details of it until a bit later. So people are just going to have to sit with this and be like, what the fuck are these bitches talking about?
What the fuck are they talking about? Diana, are you okay? No, I'm not.
You're not.
My head is so full of the production information on this movie, and I think that's part of why I'm struggling already.
Yeah.
But
If
let me get it out of my system,
Yeah.
you know?
I was going to say I think that's a good start of summary to lay the groundwork if you want to start getting this production info out of your head and into the wave form of our recording.
Oh, excellent. I can do that. All right. We're going to kind of go through phases when talking about the production of this movie. We're going to start with something fairly surface level. We're going to
Okay.
dip our toes into a more cynical side of things. Then we're going to get into some heavy technical details because there's a lot that went into this movie.
I'm
And then we're
excited for
going to
that.
descend straight into hell.
And I'm very excited for that.
I will do my best to cite my sources as I'm going. There's going to be a couple points where I'm flipping through my notes and going back and forth between a couple of sources. So just bear with me on that. We'll make sure that everything's up. Also, if you find any of this interesting, please look into the sources that we provide. There's a lot of groundwork that I'm actually not going to cover at all because there's just so much of it. Because this is a Disney movie, and so all of their techniques, all their processes are extremely well documented. Like, that's the cool thing about doing a big budget, big production company movie. There's a lot of info about it, but there's also a lot of hearsay, and I will be noting those moments when they come up. Okay?
All right.
Cool.
Okay, Virgil, lead me through Inferno.
The first source that we're looking at is from the official Disney fan club website, d23.com.
Oh, great start.
Yeah, so this is what I mean while we're doing a surface level cursory glance at this at the production history first and foremost. This is from an article specifically called "For Pete's Sake: The Long Road to Pete's Dragon" by
Oh,
Max Lark.
fun.
This article was specifically published on August 16th, 2016. Of note, 2016 is the year that the remake came out. We are going to be thanking the
Yeah.
remake very much for its renewed interest in this movie because all of my sources were either from 1977 when this movie was being released or 2016 when the remake came out and people got interested in talking about the original production.
Yeah, that's interesting. Makes
Yeah.
sense, but it's interesting that a lot of this was resurfaced, kind of, and dredged up when Disney decided to dip into the bucket of old shit they hadn't remade yet.
Yeah, old shit specifically that wasn't well received. This movie was made on an $11 million budget and made back 18 million, which not what they were hoping to take in. As we will
Yeah.
discuss, this movie specifically is riding the coattails of Mary Poppins, which did fucking gangbusters both when it came out and when it was re-released.
Yeah,
And so,
I was gonna say
yeah,
I got that feeling of Mary Poppins from it, of just, oh, this is a musical they're doing with like the animation over real footage. That's a Mary Poppins thing. I didn't know if Mary Poppins came out before this,
way
inspiring
before.
it, or after it to build upon what it was trying to do, but being way better at it. It's very funny that it's the older movie.
Mary Poppins was a 1960 something release, so about a decade before this, and also definitely not after because this is 1977. We're about to hit the 80s, which is the decade that Disney almost went bankrupt. So
Oh.
the 70s were also not a good decade for Disney. They were, again, trying to really recapture the magic of Mary Poppins specifically with this movie, but also just in general, like a lot of their movies weren't doing great. This was the time when they were really experimenting with live action releases, which, as we now see nowadays, while they are doing a lot of live action remakes, their bread and butter was animation. That's not only where they were making the most money with their movies, that's also where they were the most innovative. Because a big part of the history of Disney is technical innovation in the animation department specifically and just film in general. And that's something that
Yeah.
we are going to talk about here.
I gotta hand it to Disney. They were movers and shakers, and still are. I won't say in animation necessarily, but in a lot of other departments, they've still got their fingers on the latest shit.
For Pete's Sake, The Long Road to Pete's Dragon. Max Lark, the writer of this, immediately cites the fact that he visited the Walt Disney Archives which
Oh.
appears to be his source for all of this information. Again, the official Disney fan club. So these guys have a backdoor entrance kind of thing.
Straight from the horse's mouth, or the
Straight from the
horse's
horse's
mouse
mouth.
in this case.
So surely none of this could be biased, right?
Yeah.
None of this, you know. December of 1957. The writer Seton I. Miller is hired as a film writer for a prospective film called Pete's Dragon and the USA parentheses Forever After, which is based on an unpublished short story that he co-wrote with writer S.S. Field. In these original plans, the records call the dragon Gabriel. So we already kind of have a basis for a people name for the dragon. A few months later, in March of 1958, Pete's Dragon in the USA, now labeled Parts 1 and 2, is intended for the Disneyland TV show, because this is something that they were doing in the 50s. This is Disneyland TV show, TV programming, right? Walt Disney was also still alive at this time. After they pull out this project in 1958, they shelve it for a second time, and it would not be worked on again in his lifetime. So now we jump to 1968. It is unarchived and is shelved again very quickly after, until 1975, where production begins in earnest, where they're now calling it Pete's Dragon. And this movie will be released on December 16th of 1977. So 1975 is our kind of pinpoint, like the production, for the start of production on this project as we see it in its current iteration.
That's really strange. Was there any, like, reason why it kept getting picked up and put down over and over?
Well, I mean, Max Lark is telling you a story, Heather. He's telling you the full true story of what's happening with Pete's Dragon. So don't worry about it. The only other part of this article that I personally think is worth mentioning as far as my story is concerned is that we get some name drops. We have producer Jerome Cortland. We have the screenwriter for the movie, Malcolm Mammerstein. And then we have songwriters Al Kasha and Joel Hirschhorn. So those are some names just to kind of keep in your brain for later.
Okay.
I also want to give one last quote from the archivist who he spoke to while he was there, Kevin Kern. The production history of Pete's Dragon provides a fascinating look into the film development process and shows how at Disney a good story is never truly forgotten. And in my notes, I wrote,
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if that's true, buddy.
I originally wrote this note kind of in reference to what you were pointing out. Not only stories possibly being forgotten, but also, is Pete's Dragon the best movie they could have developed at the time? I don't know. It's a fine movie. But now my seems a bit prophetic as far as things go. And you're going to see why very quickly.
Oh, I'm going to see why incredibly quickly, I bet.
The next article that I have is called How Pete's Dragon Went from Being a Mary Poppins Wannabe to an E.T.-Inspired Delight. Right away, a little bit of a different tone.
Of all the movies, I would expect Pete's Dragon to be compared to E.T., not even on my radar, but now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of see it.
No, you don't, because he's talking about the 2016 version.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
so this is...
fuck that movie. I don't care about it.
Yeah. This was an article released on August 12th, 2016 by Jim Hill. It's currently on the Huffington Post website. It was originally on their HuffPost contributor platform. Brief tangent about contributor platforms as well. You can tell that this is on their contributing platform versus like their official Huffington Post, peer-reviewed, edited, dug down into, and made sure it was ready for the world to see.
And
this thing has a lot of typos. This thing, its transitions are kind of rough. It does not cite a single goddamn source, which was an issue for me, because spoiler alert, this was supposed to be a two-parter. We only got one part.
Oh, wait, the movie was supposed to be, or the article?
The article was supposed to be.
Okay. And for those of the audience listening, and definitely not me, could you explain what a contributing platform is in a few words?
Contributor platform, this is outside writers. More or less freelance. Sometimes they're hired on, but like on a contractual freelance position who are writing articles as opposed to people that are on their staff who
I
are being
see.
asked to write things and doing it. Contributor platforms are very good if you are, this is general advice actually, if you're a starting writer, specifically someone who wants to write like creative nonfiction, movie reviews, opinion pieces. Look for opportunities like this. You know, edit your work really well, do the best that you can, and submit to them. You probably won't get paid for it. If you do, it's a pittance. You're not going to get a lot of traction, but it's a good place to start to just get stuff on your resume. That being said, because it's usually just up to one person, and then maybe it runs through the editor of the Huffington Post, who's not paying nearly as much attention because it's going on HuffPost and not the Huffington Post, a lot of stuff kind of slips through the cracks, and unfortunately, I think this is a bit of that in here. Take everything I say about this with a bit of a grain of salt. However, I do think it is offering a different perspective on the movie, and some of the information I found I was able to corroborate with other sources. So if any of it is wrong, like if you find whatever thing that these were based on and he's getting facts wrong, I apologize. I did the best I could. I tried to look up sources for this. It was a little bit difficult. So, with that being said,
they huff on our post until we cite their sources. So, just anything. Go ahead.
In immediate contrast to the last article, which is relatively complimentary of the original movie, this guy is like, that movie is doo-doo garbage in comparison to the masterpiece that is the new 2016 movie, which, okay, dude, whatever.
I find it very funny. I find it very funny that you say this person immediately compares it to E.T. because, I don't know, I can't help but think of when we were talking about Quest for Camelot trying to rip off a series of much better movies with what it was doing, and then specifically Disney movies, and then this guy praising Disney for doing that to non-Disney movies. I think that's funny.
Yeah, we don't get much of that comparison throughout the rest of it because I imagine that was going to be in the second published article. We talked a bit about how Disney had his hands in the original concept for this back in the 50s. He apparently viewed this as a possible starring vehicle for a child star named Kevin Corcoran, who was on a Disney TV show. And also then he wanted original Pete's Dragon to be a TV show instead of a movie.
Oh, that's interesting. Like with the same concept, the same animated over live action thing?
Not necessarily. We're not at that part yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not at that part yet where we're talking about like the animation angle, because all of the articles I was looking at were a little bit unclear as to when that aspect came in. In the early 70s, it's been 5 years since Disney's last like truly successful movie, this of course being Mary Poppins. They re-released it into theaters in 1973. It does fucking gangbusters. And so that's when they're like, okay, we need to recreate Mary Poppins. Right?
Right. We gotta make that lightning strike twice.
Mm-hmm. Specifically, they want the live-action movie musical thing, right?
Right.
1971's Bedknobs and Broomsticks specifically tried to do this, obviously 2 years before they put Mary Poppins back in theaters.
I forgot about that movie.
Yeah. It has the exact same production team as Mary Poppins. That movie did not even make back its budget.
Yeah.
So
I didn't even know that was Disney.
Yes, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, that is a Disney movie. It is a Disney of Disney's movies. Again, original production team behind Mary Poppins worked on it. It completely flopped, right? Hill points to Bedknobs and Broomsticks specifically because his argument is now that they stuck too closely to Mary Poppins' formula for that particular adventure. So for their next one, in trying to recreate a Mary Poppins, they need to not stick as closely to its formula.
Oh boy, what was the lesson they pulled away from how not to stick to its formula, I wonder?
Specifically, he is crediting Disney story editor Frank Paris for coming up with this kind of two-pronged plan that they have, which is keep things in-house, but also bring in new talent.
Okay.
To keep things in-house, Frank Paris advocates for an actor named Jerome Cortland, who was an actor on the Disneyland TV show, to be the producer. Jerome Cortland, in looking for scripts to develop, was the one who rediscovered Pete's Dragon. In their archives, their out-of-house idea to bring in new talent was to pass on the Mary Poppins and Bedknobs and Broomsticks songwriters, the Sherman Brothers, in favor of hiring new people. In saying
That's a strange decision.
Well, here's the thing. This is one of the moments where I'm like, okay, this article might be hearsay combined with this guy, like, making connections that aren't necessarily there, because another article that I looked into that we'll get into later, that's called The Story Behind Pete's Dragon, written by Jim Korkus on cartoonresearch.com, said that they didn't pass over the Sherman Brothers. The Sherman Brothers had left the studio. They weren't working there anymore. So, of course, they're not going to write songs for them. They're not working there anymore. So that's why I'm like, take this article with a grain of salt. But I think it still offers good information. I can't verify that it's real using any other sources other than itself.
Yeah, I mean, I cited a TV Tropes forum post in the last episode, so I don't think anyone's going to get on your case about it.
Cool.
You're doing your due diligence.
So the new songwriters they bring on are named Al Kasha and Joel Hirschhorn, who I mentioned in the last article. These guys, prior to Pete's Dragon, won Oscars in 1972 and 1974 for their work in the movies The Poseidon Adventure and The Towering Inferno, respectively. So when Kasha and Hirschhorn are brought into the studio in order to work on Pete's Dragon, execs want an example song that they could possibly do in the movie.
Oh boy.
They do a very fun thing where they take elements from their two Oscar-winning songs, Poseidon Adventure is in the water, Towering Inferno, it's on fire, and they write a song called Candle on the Water.
Oh my god.
Not only appears in the movie, but also goes on to be nominated for an Oscar.
I was about to ask, what song from Pete's Dragon did they use as the example? Candle on the Water is such a funny choice.
Yep. And it was the right choice, apparently, because, again, it did get nominated, although it didn't win.
Yeah, I can't help but note that they only had to pitch the auditory aspects of that song. What does she mean by this? You'll find out.
You'll find out. I also do want to note that at this point, Hill is directly quoting from Kasha's memoir, Reaching the Morning After, so I assume at least some of this information is legitimate because it's pulling from a source. Okay. Did I have time to look at that? No, of course not. Who do you think I am?
I think we're made of fucking hours.
Now we're going to get into some background on the writer, Malcolm Mammerstein. The career up to this point is TV writing, specifically in soap operas, which makes sense because this was originally intended as a TV show. But of course, at this point, it's the 70s, so we're doing this as a movie now.
Yeah.
Hill implies that Mammerstein was the one who originated Pete as a 9-year-old orphan, and also the turn-of-the-century New England setting, as well as Elliot's being invisible. The way that the article is written implies that he's responsible for those three aspects of it.
So, like, the entire premise of the movie.
This is also when I first learned that Elliot was meant to be invisible the entire movie, except for a 2 to 3 minute long dream sequence, and Pete was going to be the only person who could see him IRL throughout the entire movie.
Oh, that would have been so funny.
Yeah.
That you know what? That would have felt like getting scammed by a snake oil salesman.
Well, we wouldn't have known the difference.
No, but there is a dragon here, I promise. He's just off screen laughing.
Yeah, he's just hiding from you. You can't see him, but we swear he's there. This is also a bit of a funny bit. Remember how we said we wanted to swerve away from being too similar to Mary Poppins?
Uh-huh.
Well, apparently, we wanted to cast a female lead exactly like Walt Disney found Julie Andrews.
Oh, okay.
He saw her in the original Broadway production of Camelot and decided to mold her into a Hollywood star. We want to do that with this movie. And
We
so
want to make lightning
they
strike twice.
we want to make lightning strike twice, and we're going to do that by reaching out to a 28-year-old Olivia Newton-John, which you'll know from Grease specifically, and then the article ends.
Oh, okay.
The article's done now.
This wasn't a two-parter article, that was just how it concluded.
It concluded with him saying, and I didn't write it down as a quote, but it concluded with him saying, and I'll get to that in part 2, and then part 2 is just non-existent. We don't get part 2.
Hooray.
This part we can talk about a little bit because the documentary that's on the high-flying edition of the DVD does talk a little bit about Helen Reddy, who was ultimately cast to play Nora, the lighthouse keeper's daughter, and the person who ends up being most responsible for Pete's caretaking throughout the movie. And also, spoiler, the woman that he kind of ends up with, just living with for the rest of time, presumably, at the end of the movie.
For the rest of time, Pete will never die.
Yeah, he's still alive. He's banging around.
He's out
somewhere.
there.
He's out there, watch out. But yeah, Helen Reddy, this was her first movie. She was originally just a singer. And so, yeah, this was supposed to be her Hollywood vehicle to success.
Her big debut on the big screen, I mean.
Yeah, her silver screen debut.
Yeah, that's the word.
I don't really know her from anything else. Maybe she did something else, but this was not the starring vehicle that it was meant to be, right?
Certainly not. This was Pete's Dragon.
So now we're going to move into the more technical side of things. So
I'm excited for this.
We got a lot of the production history out of the way. A lot of this I'm taking directly from the magazine American Cinematographer. These are interviews and articles that they wrote seemingly alongside the release of Pete's Dragon.
Okay.
First article within American Cinematographer that we're going to look at is called Giving Personality to an Animated Dragon by David Hammond. And this is where we enter the personality of Ken Anderson.
Okay. I'm excited to see how they give personality to an animated dragon. Because the one other example I'm working with right now, not a great one.
So, Anderson was the cartoon art director.
Director, you want to do that again?
Yeah, I'm going to. Anderson was the cartoon art director at Walt Disney Productions. He'd worked with the company for many years, originally trained as an architect, but couldn't find work there, and just over time ended up coming to Disney, working on movies, and just came to be an art director within the company, right?
Right.
He recounts that when he first got involved with the project, the only animated sequence is the one where Dr. Terminus prepares to cut up Elliot for his magical dragon parts, and otherwise Elliot was going to be invisible. So that's where he jumps onto the product.
So a little bit of a different situation.
Mm-hmm.
Where
so this is
the good doctor does get that lizard and is going to do shit to him.
Yes. Dr. Terminus, just to explain, being the ultimate villain of the movie. He wants to cut up Elliot for his parts, right?
One of a couple, quote-unquote, ultimate villains, I'd say, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Also a little bit different from what we read when Hammerstein first signed on to the project as well and wrote that initial screenplay. And here's a quote from Anderson about Elliot's being invisible and why he spearheaded the decision to make that not a thing.
Uh-huh.
They, the characters, were continually having to make excuses to explain the actions of the unseen dragon. I felt the audience would quickly lose patience. Referring to the fact that the characters in the movie would be acting too stupid to just have the dragon continue to be invisible, basically.
I don't know if they solved that problem with how they did it in this one, but I want to say that's really interesting because my assumption when I watched this movie with you again was the complete opposite. I assumed that the plan was to have Elliot be much more visibly present, but because that turned out to be too expensive, they cut way back on it. That's really interesting that it was the complete opposite of what I thought.
Oh, Heather, we're gonna get to how much of the dragon is supposed to be in this movie and how much money it cost.
Oh, maybe my assumption was accurate. It's gonna take a minute for them to loop back around, huh?
Mm,
Well, I'm
they're
hey,
gonna
I'm
get
ready to find
there.
out. I'm ready to
We're
find
ready to
out.
find out. Anderson, in designing Elliot, because he, again, spearheads the design specifically for Elliot,
Uh-huh.
he specifically took inspo from Chinese dragons in his initial designs, as well
Okay.
as pulling from the fact that Chinese dragons are generally forces of good rather than evil, and also the fact that
Right.
they're impish in their personality. So, you know how you
Okay.
kind of fucking hate that Elliot is a bit of an asshole? That's Ken Anderson's contribution, actually.
Thanks, Ken.
Another
Impish, I guess, is a good way to describe it. A less mean
I'd
way
agree.
than I'd describe it.
He also pointed to Silver Age comedian Wallace Beery as an inspiration. Wallace Beery, film actor, again, maybe not Silver Age, he might even be Golden Age. He died in the 40s. And in
I mean, I don't know who it
a
is.
but I'm just giving you a you don't need to. He's just like a bumbling kind of beefy guy. He was an actor.
Okay, I
And
see. I'm getting a picture now.
yeah. On the bonus features of the DVD, in an excerpt from Disney's Family album, they have a brief interview with Ken Anderson, and he describes his influence as a big, bumbling Wallace Beery type of dragon, bit of stubble, doesn't shave, but warm-haunted, warm-hearted,
Warm-hearted. Warm-haunted.
and also a bit paunchy, so he can't fly too well.
That's an apt description for what they ended up going with.
Yeah.
The
We're
doesn't shave bit is a little strange, though.
I guess he just wanted him to be kind of scruffy.
Kind of
Like he
beatnik,
does
maybe.
have Yeah, he does have like on the tips of his ears, he's got like a bit of hair on him, and I think that's part of it is just Elliot the Dragon has the aura of a guy who doesn't shave is what Ken Anderson I guess was going for, which I think is very fun. This article says something that kind of gets pushback from another source that I have that Pete's Dragon was the first time animation would be fully integrated into live action scenes, which I think does make a little bit of sense, but also it's a little bit iffy. On one of the bonus features on the DVD was going into the history of live action and animation being integrated specifically at Walt Disney Studios.
Yeah.
They did a lot of firsts there. It's very cool. Most of the effects up until this point had been like real people within animated sequences. Animated characters within live action sequences that also had like animated cut in backgrounds. So I'm going to read a quote directly from Ken Anderson talking about putting an animated character into a live action world. I'm quoting this fully because this is something that we talked about while watching the movie.
Uh-huh.
He had to blend in, not pop out. This took very precise planning and care. For example, every shadow had to fall exactly right.
Oh
Whenever we drew
boy.
an animated sequence, we had to know exactly where the light was falling in the live action scene. Also, human skin tones change along with the quality of light as they move from one area to another and at different times of day. Elliot's coloring had to be adjusted accordingly. These techniques are obviously a work in process. They did not always fully come through in this movie.
Yeah, they have some fucking trouble with that. I will say about the shadows, the shadow underneath Elliot, the shadow Elliot is casting,
Mm-hmm.
is usually pretty accurate for what's going on with the movie. Everything else I'm gonna say, not quite there, Chief.
For the most part, he doesn't have a lot of consistent shading. There's one part in particular where he's coming in and out of a patch of sunbeam and then like beneath a tree. And it's just fully like when he's in shadow, he's one color. When he's out in the sunlight, he's just suddenly shifts to a different color, and
Yeah,
that's kind of just funny.
I wouldn't even say color. I would just say he gets slightly more desaturated and slightly more orange.
Yeah. They did explain how they accomplished the shadow work beneath him. And actually that'll just lead into talking about the exact technique that they used in this movie in order to composite the animation and the live actors and also live action backgrounds.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about this.
It's specifically called the sodium screen process. And I'm going to give a
Ooh.
very cursory kind of blowing through of this because it is something that I mostly understand until I think about it too hard, and then it gets jumbled up in my tiny mind.
You know it's gonna be good when it's named after a chemical element.
Correct. So the way that they're doing this, for the most part, is, right, you'll have very similar to the green screen effect that you tend to see nowadays. This is actually pretty much the precursor to that.
Uh-huh.
The sodium screen process was developed by J. Arthur Rank.
Okay.
At the time, it was licensed specifically to Walt Disney Productions.
Of course.
In the documentary included on the DVD, they give a lot of the credit to Ub Iwerks. They give a lot of the credit to Iwerks. That's his name. Ub Iwerks.
Iwerks.
That name might tickle the back of your brain because this guy specifically was the one who came up with Mickey Mouse.
Oh.
That's this guy. That's this guy.
That's that guy.
It's this guy. His time at Disney was spent just doing technical innovation. Like, he's the guy. At least when you're looking at the documentary. Again, when I'm looking at my notes from the articles that I was reading, they are specifically crediting the sodium screen process to J. Arthur Rank. The documentary pretty much just gives full credit to Ub Iwerks.
Huh.
I can't explain that discrepancy, but just something to kind of just keep in your mind when you look up stuff like this. The way that this is done, you have an actor sitting in front of a blank, like, canvas background.
Uh-huh.
And that canvas, the entire shot, is being lit with sodium lighting. Sodium vapor lights.
So, like the orange street lamps you see less often now.
More or less. It casts specifically a yellowish glow.
Yeah.
That was not picked up by the camera. The camera is not picking it up. So it's only getting, really, the actor, and then behind them is a black screen. And then they take that and they get two negatives from it. One that is black on white and one that's white on black. And actually, that's coming from a separate screen on the same camera that is doing a black and white image of the actor and the background.
Okay.
And then that's being taken, those black and white images are taken to the animators, who then can, like, cut out parts of it to fit the animation in, and what they need to take out at certain moments in order to get it to kind of flow together seamlessly. And then that is the middle portion of the shot. So the actor is on the front, the animation cell is in the middle, and then the back is the live action footage, either photograph or whatever footage that they took, if they, have things that are moving in the background.
Uh-huh.
And so that's all layered on top of each other. And then oftentimes you have, like, that fourth part of it, that's the shadow that's moving underneath.
Okay.
So that's what that process is. Headache and a half.
Fascinating.
Before we get into the fuck shit, a couple more fun...
you promised me hell.
couple more fun details. The town of Passamaquoddy that most of this movie is set in. Passamaquoddy, the small New England town. Not filmed in New England. This was entirely constructed on Disney's backlot.
Of course.
In Burbank.
Of course it was.
Including that harbor that's in the movie.
That...
all the water? All that water?
Is that...
That's fake. That's fake. That's a pond.
Oh my god. Wait. It's a pond. Like, did they just, like, do clever shoot angles and, like, composite with... What about the... Like, okay, sorry, hang on. The town was all constructed. Okay.
The town is all constructed, including that water. They made that. That's on the studio backlot.
Wild. That was like a natural pond on the backlot.
No. Sorry, you're misunderstanding me.
Oh no,
that's not a natural pond.
The pond.
They built the pond.
Okay. Oh my god. So that's all pumped in. That was so much water.
Yeah, I knew that you were going to get confused because the Occam's razor of that is, oh, they had a pond and they filmed. No,
No,
Heather.
my
They built
no.
that
See,
pond.
my original guess was going to be, oh my god, was that just all water? But then you called it a pond, and I was like, oh
Oh,
wait, so was
sorry.
it? No, no, don't apologize. But no, but I was so ready to accept. Oh no, of course it's a natural body of water because that was so much water. Why would they?
No, they built that.
Wow,
They built
wow,
that and filled it with water. Filled it with water.
that's
Speaking of things that they
impressive.
built,
They don't
that
do shit like
lighthouse.
that anymore. I was going to ask if the fucking lighthouse on the ocean was also fake. Fake in the sense that
They
the ocean
constructed
is
it.
real. They really did. They
The
build
ocean
it
is
on
real.
the ocean at least. Okay, thank God.
The ocean is real. That was
I
constructed
thought you were
at.
about to tell me that Disney built a fucking ocean and covered it up, and I'm only
Well,
just
they
now hearing about it.
so they did build an ocean, but we'll get there. The
What?
big
What do
lighthouse,
you
the big
mean?
lighthouse, the big lighthouse was built at Morro Bay in California again
Okay,
with a working lamp, and they
a
had to get
candle on the
permission
water.
from the Coast Guard in order to light it, which I thought was delightful.
Yeah, that makes sense because hey, I don't know if back then lighthouses still served a functional purpose, but yeah, no, that makes sense. You can't just be building those. Those were important, specific
Yeah.
navigational tools. You
Yeah, you
can't
can't
just
just
be
build
making
that shit.
those. Yeah. It's like, what do you
Um,
mean I can't put up this exit merge sign for my short film I'm making on the Beltway? What do you mean I can't put that up?
this information specifically about the lighthouse, I am taking from a DVD bonus feature again called About Pete's Dragon. Disney did technically construct an ocean for this movie, but
You
it was
can't
a
tell me that.
miniature.
Okay.
So you know the storm sequence that's close to the end of the movie?
Yes.
That's a miniature set. That is a tiny
Oh,
lighthouse with a tiny
fun.
cliff, and then they're throwing water at the lighthouse, and it's done in slow motion to give the effect of realism.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, and that they talked about in the documentary as well.
Fun. Love me a miniature set.
I love me a miniature. We are now going to cite some information that isn't as fun.
Yeah, I'm ready.
So the lead animator on this movie, when you look at the credits, when you look at, back at the DVD, whenever you look at information for this movie, is some guy
Yeah, some
named
guy.
Don Bluth.
Never heard of him.
Never
Who
heard of
is
Don
he?
Bluth. Who
Never
is this
heard
guy?
of never heard of Jonathan Bluth.
We definitely didn't talk about him in the last episode at all.
And we definitely didn't have an extended sequence where we and other people in the animation industry cook his ass.
Without being facetious anymore, if you don't know who Don Bluth is, extremely influential animator, specifically in the 80s when you talk
Yeah.
about stuff that he kind of spearheaded. Did work at Disney for a little while, to my understanding.
No, like
Movies you might know him from, The Land Before Time, An American Tale, Secret of Nim,
Secret of fucking
Anastasia,
Nim.
All Dogs Go to Heaven, like...
yeah. His later stuff, people will say, is a mixed bag, but no. All jokes aside, Don Bluth was a fucking titan of the animation industry and has left behind quite an impressive legacy, regardless of the, consistent quality of his work.
Yeah. The one thing you can't say about him is that his animation ever looked terrible, you know? Like, his story qualities, the movie that was involved in, often suffered, I think, especially in the later years, but his shit always looked good. He
Yeah.
was... And it's very clear, just kind of from the research that I did just into this movie, he was very much a perfectionist who was dedicated to his craft and cared about things being done right more than he cared about them being done quickly or under budget.
Yeah,
So-
and I assume that made him a delight and pleasure to work with for the people who made, like, the money decisions for the movies he worked on. I'm sure they loved that about him.
Oh, absolutely. So something interesting about Pete's Dragon is that, and this is taking from now the article, the story behind Pete's Dragon, but we're also kind of going to go back and forth between that and the how to give the dragon personality article. So just bear with me on that. We're going to jump back and forth.
I'm picturing a corkboard with red string right now.
This is how I feel. Comedically enough, the journal that I use does have a piece of red string as a bookmark. And
oh, wonderful.
Interestingly enough, Pete's Dragon was the first Disney movie with animation that was not worked on by the 9 old men, who were Disney's 9 animators trained by Walt Disney himself.
Yeah, like the Disney animators.
The Disney animators. This is the first movie where none of them worked on it. They'd all retired or passed away at this point.
The Disney disciples, if you would.
So this leaves kind of a gap in their talent at the studio, right?
Yeah.
Don Bluth returned to the company. He had already left previously. He returned to the company in 1975 to assist in training new animators.
Okay.
And in doing so, it appears more or less got roped into becoming the animation director for Pete's Dragon.
Yeah, because no one else could.
Because no one else really could, it sounds like. Ultimately, 22 minutes of animated material are in this movie, which is a little over 2 hours long.
Yeah.
It was originally a 134-minute, which over time, due to the film's lack of success, got cut down to 129 and then 106 even in a 1984 release. The version that we watched is the original 134-minute long version, because since then they've since released it as the fully restored 2-hour production.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what was cut out in the other versions.
I know, right? I have no idea.
Maybe we'll revisit this someday.
Truly. The version that I had on my VHS, to my memory, was the same one that we watched, so I want to mention that out front, 22 minutes long, ultimately, that of the animation that's part of it, just to boggle everybody's minds.
Uh-huh.
And emphasize how labor-intensive 2D animation is.
I'm ready to be boggled.
The articles list between them 80 to 90 people working on about 1,700 feet of animation for this movie.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yep.
I want to say we talked about this briefly in Quest for Camelot and kind of, pondered as to how bad this was. But if you could just repeat the numbers you just said, Diana, of 22 minutes and how many animators were working on this?
80 to 90.
80 to 90 for 22 minutes for this one film.
Yep.
Quest for Camelot had 50 animators for that same amount of time for a feature length.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. This article says 17 people did key drawings, with 25 to do the in-betweens based on instructions provided by the key animators. This came out to about 120,000 drawings total. Ken Anderson specifically stated that there's a fuck ton of quality control needed in situations like this for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Another thing that I found interesting and that I was looking for when I did my rewatch of the movie, in order to, again, make a little bit less work for themselves, they had a ratio of 1 animated frame for every 2 live-action frames. The only time it was a 1-to-1 is when Elliot and a real character were interacting directly. So if you watch the movie, you'll notice that his movements can be a little bit stuttery at certain points.
Okay.
That's because the animators were giving themselves a little bit of grace.
Yeah, they were animating on 2s over their filming on 1s.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting problem I hadn't considered, because that is the standard, animating on 2s. But yeah, if you're doing that with live action film, I guess you do have to shift that around sometimes. So you were saying they were animating on 1s when it's like a specific direct interaction moment.
So think of the times like when Elliot touches Pete and picks him up and swings him around, or when Nora gives him a kiss, or when they're kind of holding hands, that they had to animate 1-to-1 to the live action in order to make it flow.
How about, yeah, thinking back on it, yeah, those were like a bit smoother in their motions now that I'm thinking about it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on that at first.
This is so interesting. I just think it's cool.
It is cool.
And then we'll give a little bit more of like the kind of neutral ground information before moving directly into hell.
I'm ready.
And and something, your brain is going to start being ticked by this one, I think. Like, well, you're going to go, oh no. Bluth in the Giving Personality article says that they always use 4 levels of cells for consistent exposure and density in the animation.
Yeah, that's true, because you can't, the more you stack them, the blurrier they're going to start to become, just because that's how materials works.
Yeah. The way that they did the drawings, they just Xeroxed them onto animation cells and then did additional inking to add dimension. This is a detail that is going to come in conflict with our next article, which I think is very fun.
Oh boy.
They mixed 600 different tints to paint the cells. Because they're hand-painted, of course, because we weren't yet a digital painting.
Of course.
Yeah. 600 different tints for 22 minutes of the same dragon. That's how much work goes into shit like this. I just think just want to keep emphasizing that for when we get into this part,
You're preaching to the choir here, because I have expressed before on this podcast how much respect I have for the animation industry and how much fucking work goes into animation, especially traditional animation like this movie is dealing with.
Yep.
God bless these people.
God bless these people. God bless us, everyone. So now we are fully into the story behind Pete's Dragon 1977, written by Jim Korkis on cartoonresearch.com. Yet another article released in 2016, which I think says a lot, considering that we just kind of spent a lot of that time in 1977 to learn about the technical aspect.
Yeah.
Something you might have also picked up on when we were talking about those specific articles is Ken Anderson comes up a lot. Again, cartoon art director at Disney specifically, worked on this movie for the original design of Elliot, and showed up a lot in promotional material at the time, to the extent that a lot of people assumed that he was the art director on the movie Pete's Dragon. Not Don Bluth.
I bet Don Bluth was fine with that.
This doesn't get into his feelings, but I did think it was an interesting detail considering how much fucking work this man put into making this movie.
I mean, I wouldn't be fine with it. I'd be like, hey, what the fuck? I wouldn't be gracious at all.
I wouldn't be either. The way that the animation versus live action process worked, they filmed all of the live action stuff prior to doing any of the animation, basically. Production wrapped.
That makes sense.
All of the sets were completely struck. They tore down all the sets, and that's when the animation really started in earnest.
Okay.
So this means, like, if anything was fucked up on the live action end, they would have just had to work with it.
Yeah.
They just had to do whatever, right?
Yeah. So they couldn't. Yeah, because if all the sets are struck, they couldn't go back and reshoot. Like, oh, this angle's really inconvenient for animation, actually. We're going to have to start over. No, you can't. No. Work with it.
No, the sets are gone. They don't exist anymore.
Passamaquoddy is in hell.
We burned it down. Also, naturally, there were delays in the live-action production, which meant that delayed the animation team.
Mm-hmm.
In working on this thing, the animators regularly worked 100 hours per week. They were not paid overtime.
Yeah.
They were not paid overtime. They were instead given compensation time after production completely wrapped. In a studio press release, animator Gary Goldman, who was became friends with Don Bluth while working with him on this movie, and also later left the studio alongside him, was quoted as saying they were often working until 10 o'clock at night, and not even the janitors were still there in the studio with them. It was just the animators. There was originally a $1.8 million budget set aside for the animation specifically for about 900 feet of animation.
Oh, they cleared that easily.
When management first saw a completed segment of animation, they liked it so much that they asked for 2 times as much animation without increased budget or an extended deadline.
I was gonna say, oh, they would pay with increased pay, right? No, of course not. Of course not, you fucking idiot.
No. Bluth, because he is
God.
a fucking perfectionist hack fraud, but actually, no, he's not a hack fraud. He's a creative genius and very dedicated to his work. Added to the crunch because he wanted key cells to be hand inked rather than Xeroxed because it would help specifically to blend in with the live action. So,
Yeah.
so he's making this good creative decision, but it's going to slow them down. And also, they have even more time constraint now that they have to make more, and also don't have any more money to do it with.
The ever-present friction between art and product.
Yeah. The craziest thing is, they met the stupid deadline.
Holy shit.
They
I
met
was
the
expecting
deadline.
you to talk about delays. What the fuck?
They met the deadline and only went $70,000 over budget. And I say only, that's a lot of money, but considering that they were given 1.8 and then weren't given any more, $75,000 over budget is not that much. Management, of course, reprimanded them for this.
Oh, go fuck yourself, management. These men are heroes.
Bluth, aforementioned Goldman, and also John Pomeroy, who did key animation for Elliot, along with 8 other animators, left the studio in 1979, 2 years after this movie was released. Bluth cited this movie specifically as the start of his disillusionment with the company.
Fair.
Here's a quote from an interview in the Pasadena Star-News, which was cited in this article. Card Walker, who was the Disney CEO at the time, had made an impossible deadline because he had already booked the picture into Radio City Music Hall. We worked until 9 every night to get the picture finished. The artist got no raises, not even any thanks. Then they read that Card and Ron Miller, also part of leadership at Disney, split $3 billion in bonuses.
Oh,
what is this? The artist asks. I had no answers.
Yeah. God damn,
then,
what
course,
a legacy for this movie to have. This is the movie that made Don Bluth stop believing in Disney.
And remember when we first watched it and saw his name appear in the credits, we both immediately went, this was the movie that killed Don Bluth's career at Disney. Because again, this was released in 1977. He was out of the company more or less 3 years later.
Yeah, immediately we were like, this was the thing that did it.
This was the thing that did it. Which is hasty because Heather, was it worth it?
No.
Heather, was it worth it? Yes.
No, it wasn't.
All right. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, it's time to move on to the true meat of the episode, which is, of course, discussing the movie itself.
Yes. We're going to talk about what happens in Pete's Dragon. You got a little sneak preview at the start of this episode, but now we're getting into it.
Yep. So we open with opening credits because this movie is old and also a Disney movie. Delightful matte paintings behind the credits of all of the actors and the crew and the cast, etc.
And the animators.
I like these matte paintings a lot.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of them. We were talking about them, like, when we watched the movie, and they're not meant to be realistic. They're very painterly. It's clearly done, like, in a style where it looks like a painting. You can see the texture and, like, the brush strokes. We were talking about why they were doing it in this style of matte painting, and what I said is that it reminded me, because what this is it's like a slow scroll over these matte paintings that are paintings of, like, scenery and actual scenes from the movie. We see, you know, the lighthouse that's going to come up. We see Passamaquoddy. We see some of the people in it, just like little stills and, like, pastiches of this town and such. And it didn't click for me until the second time we watched it, you know, to take proper notes on it, where I was like, oh, this is like a Disney ride. This is like an old Disney ride where they just put you on a fucking cart and wheel you through some rooms while music is playing. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, my theory was that this was kind of to psychologically prep the audience for the fact that the movie doesn't look entirely realistic. I like both of our explanations.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit of column A, little bit of column B. Column D for Disney, as in, this is just what they do.
And then the first proper scene that we get is of Pete entering the scene
Oh,
on
he
the
enters it all right.
invisible dragon.
Or, as you can see if you look hard enough, on some wires. We just see this boy with his legs kind of spread out and his hands gripped in front of him like he's riding like a witch's broom, and he's just bobbing up and down through like a sound stage of a jungle.
Yeah. There were a couple of behind the scenes footage shots that I found in my research, and depending on the shot that we're seeing, there's sometimes kind of like a full rig that he's sitting on, and sometimes delightfully he has in a wire harness
Uh-huh.
atop like a big stick, and a man is running him around the studio.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah. Once he is sat down off of his dragon, he begins speaking for the first
Yeah.
time, and we get the sense that he is running away from some kind of danger. He's imploring Elliot, the dragon, to be quiet, although we still can't see him. We're not going to see him for a little bit.
Yeah, he tucks himself away into a log right as some hicks appear.
Some hillbillies, if you will. Derogatory. They don't like them in this movie.
Yeah.
And this begins the first song of the movie. It's a right away thing. It's called The Happiest Home in These Hills. And it is a song wherein these dirty, dirty folk sing about how they're going to kill this boy.
Yeah, so
Hey,
how
remember?
many there are
Remember?
there's no, go ahead.
Remember what I said about child abuse? It's
Yeah.
happening right now.
So there are 4 of these uncouth ruffians, a ma, a paw, and how did you say they were credited as? Like 2 violent brothers?
Yeah, 2 violent or sadistic brothers,
Yeah,
I think
2
it was.
sadistic brothers it was, an older and a younger. One of them looks remarkably like a young Willem Dafoe.
This also is a remarkably cheery song. Most of the music in this is very upbeat and lighthearted sounding, although not necessarily in content. Because again, this song is about them killing this boy. They are describing in detail how they're going to murder him.
Yeah, it's a song where they are constantly switching between putting on a false air to try and lure this boy, who we learn is name of Pete, out of his hiding spot. They're promising him like cookies and candy and breakfast in bed, and as like the second that doesn't work, they go to talking to each other about how they are going to throttle the ever-loving piss out of this child. We also learn the reason they are looking for this boy is he is an orphan whom they have purchased from the orphanage. At least that's how they frame it. It could be they're referring to just like the adoption fee or whatever. But they say, we purchased him for $50.
Plus fees.
Yeah, plus fees. This is important. And we don't have the money to get another one, which is why we are out here in these hills looking for him.
But also we're gonna fucking end his existence.
Yeah.
Wild opening number.
Wild opening number. It's quite the jaunty beat, though.
Yeah.
It's catchy. But, as they're looking for him, something knocks them all into the thickest, goopiest mud ever conceived by the hands of man or God.
They love to dump people in goo in this movie. It's their favorite thing.
Yeah, they all kind of fall in one at a time in a series of comedic pratfalls before their anger gets directed at each other and the search kind of falls apart. They head home, pissed off that they couldn't find this boy. As they're like going away, Pete hidden in his log starts doing a thing where he looks directly into the camera. He makes
That's right.
full eye contact with us, the audience, and begins talking to this unseen friend who's helping him. Because at this point, we don't know who the fuck or what the fuck this is.
We
But
have
we
no
will find
concept.
out very soon.
Canonic. Just pretend you haven't seen what the poster looks like. You haven't looked at the cover art. You don't
Or
know what's about to
heard the
appear.
title of the movie.
No. You do not know that there's a dragon
Yeah.
in the what?
What, huh?
Huh?
What?
Dragon?
Wait, what?
Crazy. Huh?
Okay. But yeah, we're cutting into a daytime scene where Pete comes out of the log, and I
It's a
don't know if
different
they're trying
scene.
to, yeah, I don't know if they're trying to convince us that this is where they were. This is where they were hiding, because it's not. They're in an orchard. I don't know if the log got moved while he was in it, but it just kind of glosses over that point. We just keep going.
It might make sense that the log got moved because we now, at just under 11 minutes in, see the dragon for the first time. And
Yep.
he's decently big, you know?
Dragon spotted. There he
Dragon
is.
spotted. This is Elliot.
This is
He's-
Elliot.
He is a large, somewhat rotund, friendly looking beast. He's got a
Yeah.
very round chin, wide, adoring eyes.
If you have ever seen Don Bluth draw a reptile,
That's what he looks like.
yeah, he is very, very fitting with like the Bluthian stylings.
Which is very funny because he did not spearhead that design.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But yes, we see Elliot kind of pop in from his invisibility, and he starts making noises. Elliot communicates exclusively through like mumbles and rumbles and this weird clicking sound he sometimes makes, and other times he kind of pants like a dog.
Yeah.
I don't like any of these sounds. I find them annoying, and I think that's what was kind of the crux of my distaste for this movie as a child, is I was just very annoyed by Elliot.
He makes a lot of like grumbling and like mouth sounds. If you're someone with misophonia, you might get really pissed off listening to Elliot.
Yeah.
This
And it's a good thing we don't have to deal with it in, say, a musical number that's happening
surely
right now.
Yeah, second musical number. Song title is Boo Bop 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 Bop. Parentheses, I love you too. I copied that down word for word.
This is one thing that has not changed from my childhood. I do not care for this song whatsoever. It makes me mad.
I love this song because it's fucking stupid. It's almost like a love ballad between these two. They're
It's
just
weird, and like that is not just us. Pete like sings about how like, oh, it's so nice to wake up with you beside me. It's like stuff that would not be out of place in a like lovers duet,
yeah.
which
There's
is weird, right?
yeah. My favorite line is when he says, "Your voice is the sound of angels singing, a sound which I love to hear." And then the dragon once again is like, "Bum bum 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 bum."
Yeah.
It's really funny. I think it's great.
Yeah. So what this song is meant to establish is that Elliot is Pete's bestest friend in the whole wide world. But he never really sings about like friendship stuff. It's like this lovey-dovey tone with it, because this is also like the refrain of this song is kind of like an, oh, you're saying you love me, I love you too.
Yeah. That's also something that more or less gets established in the song, is that Pete can understand the noises that Elliot is making.
Yes. I was gonna say, I think the reason this song feels weird with regards to the lyrics is we're only hearing and understanding half of them.
Yeah.
Like, we're not getting the actual rapport that Pete and this dragon have. We're only hearing this one side of the lyrics, and the one side of the lyrics are, like, talking about looking into your eyes and waking up next to you, and you whispering so sweetly, and it's strange. It's a strange choice. That's my whole take on it.
I will defend it a little bit, only because I think it is demonstrating that they have an unusually tight bond, largely because Pete is an orphan coming from an abusive household. And so I think it makes sense that they have this tight relationship. And Pete specifically is very lovey-dovey because it's like, oh, this is like the one guy who cares about and for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I do have a little bit of, rose-colored glasses on when looking at this
No,
movie.
I think you're right because like that's absolutely what it's meant to be. And I know I'm like just being like I don't know. It's a bunch of little things where it's like I don't like this dragon. I don't like the noise he's making. It's 50% of this song and this child's also not very good at acting or singing in it.
Heather is Heather is slumped in her chair, arms crossed.
My arms are not crossed, but I am pretty slumped right now.
After this song concludes, they keep walking down the road, easing on down the road, and they get to a sign that says Passamaquoddy, which learned in my research is, as oftentimes this kind of shit is, name of, I believe, a Native American tribe, or else it is a word of Native American origin. Because
No,
of course it is.
that makes a specific bit they do throughout the entire movie real. Ooh.
Racist?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yay!
Okay, well, yeah.
Passamaquoddy.
They see the sign for this town, and Pete says, "Oh, there's a town ahead." Interestingly, this orphan can read. This orphan who has been raised by horrible, backwards people who do nothing but beat him and force him to do labor can read. I just think that's interesting. But anyways, he turns to Elliot and he says, "Elliot, we can hang out in this town. I think this will be a good place to lay low for a while. Don't fuck this up for us." He's a lot nicer about it, but it's basically implied Elliot is a bit of a troublemaker and can cause mischief to happen that is inconvenient for Pete. So there's an extended bit where Pete is trying to convince him to turn invisible, and Elliot keeps kind of turning only parts of himself invisible and going like this.
I have been enormously charmed by this sequence. I think it's delightful.
Yeah. And
I think Elliot's cute. I'm not bothered by his design.
yeah. Visually, I think I'm a lot more privy to Elliot's design. I think I'm a lot more charmed by it. The noises I still can't get over.
Yeah, that's pretty fucking obnoxious.
It's just as well Elliot disappears because we note, and we kind of mentioned this earlier, but we note, especially in this scene, Elliot doesn't fit into the environments very well.
No.
He's kind of flat shaded. He casts a shadow, but it's really easy to tell this is a cartoon drawing a flat image over top a bit of film. And obviously, that's what it is, but we've seen better examples of this, so we know that it can look better than it does here.
Yeah, we talked a lot about the technique, something that I wrote down in my notes, which is something that it's a statement that I live by when it comes to a lot of art, which is kind of a reminder to people. It takes an enormous amount of talent and effort to make something that looks that bad, Like anytime you see something, you're like, wow, that was a piece of garbage. Just remember that there was work put into it.
Yeah.
We've been ragging on movies now for 4 episodes at this point. We respect the artistry behind movies. We're going to goof on them, but also...
Yeah. We're here to do a clown show and make you laugh. It's all part of the bit. This is also still art, and it is stuff that is beyond our capability to make, and probably yours too, if you're listening to this. So keep that in mind before you go around talking shit in casual conversation.
Now that we have decided we're going to enter Passamaquoddy, Elliot has graciously turned himself invisible. It is time for the invisible dragon fucks up everything bit.
Yeah.
He fucks up everything.
He fucks up everything. There are so many, bits that they do as Pete kind of gallivants through the streets of town with this invisible bumbling buffoon following behind him.
My favorite is when Elliot runs a stick along the fence, and then... Pete runs a stick along the fence, and then Elliot comes behind him and fucking wrecks the entire thing.
Elliot runs past a picket fence with his stick, and it's like, as he, like, hits the stick along the post, and then Elliot, presumably with, like, his huge tail or one of his claws, tries to do the same thing, and it just uproots the entire fucking fence. The practical stuff they do here is really fun. I always appreciate this sort of thing. The shot where Elliot fucks up the cement, like, he walks with his big dragon feet through this sidewalk, and there's just, like, one after the other big splashing footprints in the concrete. And I think you told me they did this with like molds underneath. It's not concrete, it's like a special mixture that has a different kind of viscosity, so it holds better as they do this, but they kind of just dropped molds out from underneath it so that it would sink down into the shape of these footprints.
Yeah, it was like some kind of board with a material similar to concrete in appearance. It's great stuff. They also are doing a lot of this, specifically the concrete and then some more of the other choreography. They're doing this in time to the music, presumably to, one, just tie into the fact that it's a musical, but also I think to make sure that all of their practical effects are landing and are being timed correctly. There's also a bit of dancing that's going on that I think is fun.
Yeah, and speaking of dancing, as he leaves this trail of chaos behind him, Pete keeps, like, turning around to admonish Elliot and tell him to stop messing everything up. And he's kind of, you know, it's more of a finger waggling than anything else. And then he turns around and Elliot immediately continues to do that.
Yeah.
He runs into a fleet of school children being led by this school teacher character who we kind of immediately learn, oh, this character's bit is that they repeat things a bunch, because as soon as Pete bumps into her, she's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And she kind of is like, oh, you're a dirty street urchin. You're not one of my students. Get out of my way. You're going to make us late for schooling. And this kind of starts the trend of Elliot's quote-unquote protectiveness of Pete, where if any adult is, like, even remotely mean or not kind to Pete, Elliot takes this as license to fuck with them. And what he does here is he commits sexual assault, basically, because he takes her petticoat, which is the garment she is wearing underneath her skirt, and hooks it onto a nail so that it is torn away completely as she walks away. And Pete kind of immediately catches the blame for this because, you know, no one else can see Elliot. He tries to defend himself, but she's like, I'm going to call the cops on you and have you thrown in jail, kid. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And then this kind of leads to a mob forming in the town where everyone's like, yeah, this kid just fucked up everything. He destroyed my fence. He ruined my concrete with his big dragon-shaped feet. He made me drop all my fucking eggs into the face of the mayor, which ruined his cigar. He spooked my horse somehow. These townies are idiots.
Remember how we talked about Anderson being like, I'm afraid that people will think that the townies are stupid. Congratulations, we still think so, because they are.
Yeah. You didn't do a good enough job preventing that, man. These people are morons. They're dumb.
You did fuck up my favorite bit, and that's okay, so I'm gonna repeat it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. Don't apologize. When the horse gets spooked, because Elliot somehow spooks the horse. I don't exactly know how. I guess horses have a sixth sense. Spooks a horse. You see the horse is indeed wearing a tiny hat. I love that. And the guy leads the horse over to, like, the ring of people who are mad at Pete. And he's like, you scared my horse, Victoria! And that's my favorite line in this movie.
Oh.
Specifically, Victoria the horse. Not just his horse. The horse has a name. Her name is Victoria, and she wears a funny hat. And I enjoy that enormously.
She does wear a funny hat.
Yeah.
Oh.
After Pete gets yelled at by the townies, who are rightfully pissed that their stuff has been destroyed, but also, like, the child definitely didn't do it.
Yeah, they're going to throw him in jail. Like, they're going to hit him with sticks and throw him in jail. They start chasing him, and he tucks himself away behind some, I don't know, stock? Some fishing stock?
He yells at his dragon, who appears for a brief moment to look not at all contrite, but very
Yeah.
upset. It's like
Elliot's all
yelling at a
smiles
golden
when he first
retriever.
shows up. Yeah, Elliot's all smiles when he appears, and Pete's like, "Hey, don't. Hey, this is serious, man. You just messed up everything again."
I asked you not to do that and you didn't. And Elliot like goes and crouches in a corner and looks sadly at
Like a
Pete.
yeah, like a dog that's been told not to pee on the carpet.
And then one of my favorite characters in the movie shows up.
Yes, here comes
So,
Lampy.
so this movie has a couple of famous comedic actors in it. One of them is Mickey Rooney, who's playing Lampy,
Mhm.
and he does a lot of fun drunk acting in this movie.
It's
Lampy spends
so
most of the movie
fun.
drunk.
He is like piss drunk and shit faced for most of this movie, and he does a great job selling that.
He stumbles out of this bar, presumably, and tries to get
Hmm.
on his bicycle. This bicycle, which will be not entirely relevant, but just continues to appear so he can have fun bits with it. And he stumbles over to Pete and notices Elliot, and at first does not really clock what he's seeing.
Yeah, his initial reaction is he turns to this dragon, then he turns to Pete and just goes, "I think your friend is sick. He's looking a little green."
And
Through
then Pete
extremely
just
slurred speech, you can barely understand him.
And then Pete, despite the fact that he's the one who's constantly like, Elliot, you have to be invisible, is like, oh, my friend's not sick, he's just a dragon. And Mickey Rooney's like, oh, a dragon. A dragon! And then runs, flees the scene.
I don't think Pete even tells him that. I think Pete just says, "Oh, he's not sick," and Mickey Rooney goes, "Well, if I didn't know any better, I think he's a dragon." And then he puts the dots together and
Oh,
runs
okay.
back to the bar. And the subtitles for this scene is just shouting nonsense. And brother, you could not be more accurate. The noises coming out of this man's mouth are wild. It doesn't sound human at some points. It's just this incoherent, like, babbling shriek he is doing as he is just running through this bar and, like, grabbing people, shaking them, not making any sort of sense until he slips into song.
Someone, I think, slaps him on the back, and then I think he downs like a quart of whiskey or beer or something. And then we are into the best song of the movie called I Saw a Dragon. It's so energetic. Mickey Rooney is running around telling people about this dragon that he saw.
This song is
There's
so good. This
It's
entire
so much
scene is
fun.
great.
It's great. And this is also where we are introduced to Lampy's daughter, Nora, played by Helen Reddy.
Yeah.
And she is our main female protagonist of the movie. It's implied that when she comes in that, you know, her dad comes to the bar to get drunk and she's like, why do you guys keep doing this to him? Stop encouraging
Yeah.
him.
This is
But
a
of course,
regular
Mickey
occurrence for
Rooney,
them.
yeah. But of course, Mickey Rooney is like, Nora, I saw a fucking dragon. She's like,
Nora.
well, this is
I
stupid.
Nora, I spotted a dragon. This is so important. Yeah.
They have some fun with Nora. She's part of the
Yeah.
choreography now. She jumps up on a barrel and runs across it, and beer foam starts spraying out from everywhere, and people are covered in
Yeah.
goo again because
Her anger kind of melts away as she joins in on the kind of revelry going on in this place. So it doesn't seem like it's too big a chip on her shoulder. Like, oh, my dad comes in here, he drinks, he's a little oafish, I guess, but we're all friends here in this town.
Yeah, best
I will
best
say,
sequence in the movie.
yeah, this sequence is great. I will say something I noted as we were watching this is you can kind of see a little bit of the Beauty and the Beast primordial DNA in this movie, particularly this
Yeah.
scene. Because this is a lot like Belle and Maurice's deal in that movie, where, oh, my father, the old coot who the people at the bar all laugh at, and they're like, "Oh, that old weirdo, that old coot who doesn't know what he's talking about. Oh yeah, you saw some kind of beast, you saw some kind of dragon. Yeah, sure, buddy. You're full of piss and vinegar." And the daughter who's like, "Please leave my dad alone. Please leave him alone."
Please leave him alone. Although I guess this town respects Lampy.
Yeah.
It's implied that they respect him a bit more than that because he is the lighthouse keeper.
Yeah.
Which is our next scene is Nora taking her dad comedically wobbling on his bicycle
yeah.
back up to the lighthouse.
Before we depart from this scene, I just want to point out a couple standout moments because I did have a lot of fun watching this.
Okay.
There's a scene where like Mickey Rooney stumbles to a window, looks outside, and they cut to just a close-up shot of a horse,
That's
like
right.
braying at the camera, and Lampy starts screaming again. He's like constantly moving through the bar and just slamming down drinks as part of his choreography, which is fun. In my notes, I wrote Mecha Shiva, which
Oh
there's like
yeah.
there's like three guys who, to fuck with Lampy, like get on top of each other and start waving their arms around beside them.
The
Like,
lowermost guy blows some smoke out of his mouth.
yeah. And they get on like these barrels and do like choreography while like running on the barrels, and they're rolling, and then they just shoot out a bunch of foam all over the bar, and they're all laughing. It's great. This is a fun scene.
I wish the entire movie was this.
Yeah. This high
So
energy
one,
and this playful and this great.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Inspired decision, I think, to cast
Yeah.
Mickey Rooney, especially.
Yeah.
He's just great in this movie.
Yeah. Wonderful, super fun, very playful scene. This man is traumatized for life.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They get back to the lighthouse, and Nora is tucking him into bed, and Mickey Rooney is still doing some very fun drunk acting. He's describing the dragon, and he like puts his face right next to hers and is like, he was this close to me. And I love that moment so much.
He's speaking in barely more than a whisper. His voice has been like, he is so deeply rattled. He's like recalling details one at a time as he walks back through this moment. And the way he's describing this dragon is not accurate to Elliot. He's like, he was 50 feet tall, he could breathe fire, he was going to bite my head off. But then he remembers, actually, two things. One, he smiled at me.
He
And
smiled
Nora's
at you.
like, oh, well, did you smile back? And he's like, fuck no, I got out of there.
I
And-
left.
Yeah. And then he remembers there was a boy with him who
Dun,
said
dun,
he was his
dun.
friend. And he kind of mulls over that as he is tucked into bed to sleep off the inevitable hangover.
This leads to Nora kind of cleaning up around the lighthouse, and she looks out the window and actually sees Pete like walking down the beach and into a cave, which leads to one of a couple of sad cave scenes, I guess.
This is
Where-
the cave where you go to be sad.
This is the cave where Elliot is now going to hang out for a lot of the rest of the movie. He's trying to like cheer Pete up, but Pete's kind of rightfully like, no, dog, I asked you to do something and you didn't do it. And Elliot gives him his kicked dog look and tries to like play tic-tac-toe, but Pete's not having it.
Yeah.
He's
this
using
is-
like a stick with ash on it on his stomach, and Pete is just ignoring him.
This is another reason I think I did not like this movie as a child, is when this fictional dragon who is like a dog, basically, refuses to admit his wrongdoing. It probably made me really fucking pissed off as a kid. And
Yeah.
looking back on this, that's funny. That's, like, genuinely, I think that's really funny that I got this mad at this fictional dragon as a kid, that it created, like, a foundational emotional memory in my soul. Where,
Yeah.
without understanding why, I would feel that anger anytime I saw a drawing of this fucking dragon.
Yeah. Well, Pete is also very upset by his dragon. So much so that he starts crying, and it's like, oh, okay, so this scene is actually kind of sad and upsetting.
Yeah.
But that tension is broken by the fact that, oh no, Nora is here. Elliot, hide. Elliot, hide behind that rock, because it's not like you can turn invisible or something.
Yeah, it's not like you can turn invisible. Well, we, the audience, have to see his reaction to this occurrence, so he can't turn invisible, actually.
Which is very odd, because basically, like, the scene plays out, Nora's asking him, where did you come from? Can you go home? Finds out he doesn't really have one and invites him back to the lighthouse.
Yeah,
And-
because she's cool. Because Nora is
she's cool
super
as fuck.
fucking cool, actually. She's like, oh, you're some kind of homeless urchin? Come have some chowder.
Yeah, come
Come
eat.
to my house, have a bath, have some chowder, and sleep there tonight.
Yeah. And in doing this, we keep kind of cutting back to Elliot, and he has a range of emotions to a certain extent. You can't tell if he's like angry or upset. And once Pete goes to leave, he like sits down and acts all sad. But then Pete runs back in. He finishes the game of tic-tac-toe and says, oh, I'm going to update you on how good the chowder is. And now Elliot's happy again. And I think it's supposed to be that his upset was less that Nora is now taking care of him and more that their conflict wasn't resolved. But it almost feels like the movie is setting up that Elliot is now going to be aggressive towards Nora, which doesn't happen. It's a little odd.
It's a little odd. It could also be like foreshadowing of what Elliot's ultimate role is in Pete's life and how their
Yeah.
friendship is like what the arc of their friendship is ultimately going to be. But we'll get into that a little later because
Yeah.
Pete has to go eat chowder and regale the story of him being an orphan slave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
He
won't describe, we're not going to describe like what exactly is happening.
yeah,
Watch the
but
movie knowing that there is child abuse and like
yeah.
specifically physical abuse mentioned.
We'll leave it
But
at what he describes to Nora basically immediately makes her go, "Oh dear God, this child needs my help."
yeah, they don't say it right away, but it's pretty much implied that the movie is going to be about Pete coming to live with this woman and her as a mother figure to him. We also get a mention of some guy named Paul. There's a picture of him on. There's like a little side table and his picture is on it.
Yeah, Pete
And
is asking
Nora,
about her family, and he comes up.
yeah. And she basically says, I was supposed to marry him. He was lost at sea.
A
And
year ago,
that's
specifically.
a year ago. So he's gone.
Yeah. Here, Pete mentions his having a dragon. He's like, oh, well, I have someone to look after me, and his name is Elliot, and he's a dragon. And Nora very clearly is like, oh, this is a flight of fancy that this child is using to cope. I'm not going to shatter his illusion, so I will play into it immediately. And she starts asking, oh, your dragon, that's so cool and interesting. Where is he? And he's like, oh, he's in that cave. And she's like, wow, that's really cool. Like, I'm saying this and I sound sarcastic, but no, Nora is very good at talking to this child.
Yeah, she's got a good teacher-mom voice. Also
Yeah.
important to note, the reason that the reason that Pete brings up Elliot in this context is because when Nora says, oh yeah, Paul was lost at sea, Pete with his child brain is like, oh, he's lost? Well, my dragon's good at, like, my dragon knows things. Like, he can probably find that guy. And
Yeah.
this is also the moment that Nora connects that Pete is the boy child that her dad was referring to when he said that the
Yes.
dragon had a friend.
Yeah. So when she asks him to describe his dragon, we get, I believe, a song
Yes.
that I don't know the name of, but what I do know is that Pete has no fucking idea what a dragon or most other animals actually are, because he knows what a cow is at least, presumably because he's forced to work on a farm, but he describes Elliot as having the head of a camel. He doesn't. The neck of an alligator, an animal that
Crocodile.
famously does not have necks. Okay, sorry, crocodile. My bad. Do you think Pete knows the fucking difference?
Well, I do.
Okay, well, yeah. The neck of a crocodile. What else does he? He says the ears of a cow, which is maybe the only accurate description. And he also says that Elliot is both a fish and a mammal.
I love that line so much. It's so fucking funny.
Like, this kid does not know what animals are.
Yeah. The song is called It's Not Easy, and it's effectively just both Pete and Nora talking about what it means to have someone to care for you. And I'm like, here's the thing about a lot of the music in this movie. It's not there to move the plot along. It's there to exist and sound nice. I don't fucking
It's
remember.
so easy
I remember
to do that.
It's so easy to do that. I remember the parts of the songs that are funny. For example, Elliot being described as part fish, part mammal. That's great.
It's pretty funny. Anyways, at the end of this song, Lampy, well, Pete is tucked into bed. He goes to bed, and then the next morning, Lampy comes down, and Pete's like, "Good morning, sir." And Lampy, presumably hungover to hell, goes, "Oh yeah, hey kid, how's it going?" And then realizes, "Oh God, you're the dragon child," and he starts screaming and pissing and crying. He languishes in despair at the sight of Pete.
It's so funny. I love you, Mickey Rooney.
Yeah. But Nora comes in, diffuses the situation, kind of talks her dad down of his panic, and Lampy decides to take this as silver lining and goes, "Well, okay, well, if the boy's living at my house, I can go tell all the guys at the bar who were laughing at me that they were wrong, and then I can just show them the dragon." Because he finds out it's living in the cave right next to his lighthouse.
Yeah, there are a couple important things that happen. One, Lampy is upset to learn that Elliot has a name. I think that's great. Pete says that Elliot is unpredictable, which he's a shit starter. Yeah, we knew
Oh
that.
yeah, because he asks
Also,
if Elliot's dangerous. He says, "Oh, but he's not dangerous, right?" And Pete goes, "Eh,
eh.
eh."
And then, last but not least, Lampy stumbles over his words and more or less implies that they're going to eat Elliot, which I think is
Right.
very funny.
God, what does he say? He says, we're gonna eat the lamp and light the dragon." And then he goes, "Oh no, we're gonna light the lamp. Sorry."
Sorry.
Yeah.
Hard cut.
Hard
Hard
cut.
cut.
Hard cut. Bana! A musical sting of a guy on the ceiling looking through a telescope. Or sorry, not a ceiling, a roof. There is a guy on a roof in town looking through a telescope, and he's watching what I have referred to in my notes as the scam wagon roll up to town, and he yells out to the people, "Dr. Terminus is coming," and everyone
Is known.
fucking locks in for this.
The wagon is coming down the road. No horse. It is two men desperately trying to steer this thing not into anything.
Yeah, they've got sails on it, and they are clambering downhill as townsfolk kind of like run out to like wave their arms at him. It's unclear how they feel to see him, but they clearly have some kind of relationship with this man as a town. They know who the fuck this is by name.
He comedically ruins everything that Elliot ruined once again before finally managing to bring the wagon to a stop in the middle of the town. Both men are flung from it, and this is when we see for the first time Jim Dale as Dr. Terminus in delightful scam artist getup. He's got a top hat and a cape, and
He's dressed
is
like the
often, like,
Wizard of Oz. He's dressed like a
he's just
magician.
he's dressed like a magician, but worse. And then his assistant
Hoagie.
dash boyfriend Hoagie, played by Red Buttons, also a comedian. These two gents also give me a lot of joy. I like
Yeah.
them.
And as you so eloquently put it, these two men have kissed.
These two men have kissed. It's not even that I want them to or that they should. It's that they definitely have, and also have probably been together for a little while. They have a lot of old married couple energy.
They do. Because the reason they get flung from their wagon is Hoagie has to throw an anchor out to stop them. It catches on the mayor's porch, rips it off completely, which makes the mayor eat shit and despair that he has lost control of his town. And they start bickering like an old married couple about, "Well, you said to throw out the anchor."
There's actually a third person who gets thrown out of the wagon with them. This, of course, being Mr. Bones, who is presumably their dead gay son.
Oh, okay. This is a new bit you're doing for me.
I'm doing the bit for everyone who knows.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
They
like
love him.
it's a skeleton that's got all kind of like phrenology shit drawn on it.
They love him. They love their dead gay son.
They love their dead gay son.
This,
But
of course, leads
yeah.
into...
Yeah, I was going to say after they are flung out, the scam wagon pops open, all these panels come out, a stage flips down, the curtains go up, and we realize, oh, these are
Oh.
snake oil salesmen.
That's what they're here to do. And we get confirmation in this with the next song, which is Passamaquoddy, which begins, and honestly kind of excruciating bit where
Yeah,
Dr. Terminus cannot pronounce the name of this town.
the
Time
least funny bit in the movie begins, and they love this bit so much they come back to it so often.
much.
And with the context of this being a Native American word is a little uncomfortable.
Naturally. But yeah, they confirm that this guy is a snake oil salesman. Although he is kind of based with it, because one of the townspeople complaint is it's a woman and his tonics made her gain weight. And he's like, oh, but there's so much more to love. And I think that's very fun. Another guy now has pink hair and pronouns.
Yeah, and he is so ADR'd, it's painful. It is so clearly not this man's voice. Like, the sound of everything else, like, quiets down as he talks, and it is just a different dude saying things. Yeah. And
But
once again, demonstrating that these townspeople are stupid. They are fully prepared to beat the ever-loving piss out of Doc Terminus and throw him out of town because the last time he came here, his medicines didn't work and made shit worse for people. And he placates them by going, well, no, no, no. This shit's from France. And they all collectively go, well, well, if it's from France.
And then he tricks them further by having Hoagie come out in fantastic drag.
Yeah, Hoagie's got that drag on, if you know what I'm saying.
When I was a kid, I genuinely never picked up on the fact that this little old lady who she like can't hear in quotes, and so
Yeah.
Doc Terminus like dumps some of his potion into a vial that she puts in her ear, and she can now hear things.
His potion that is like, racist and spelled wrong.
Oh yeah, it's called Oriental Oil Ornament.
Yeah, which is very clearly supposed to say ointment.
I love it. Yeah. I think that's an intentional bit, that last part, and I like it.
Diana, you said you couldn't tell as a child that this old lady was Hoagie. Diana, as an adult, I couldn't tell this old lady was Hoagie until you pointed it out to me.
Because I realized it like as we were watching, I was like, oh fuck, that's Hoagie. That's great. I love it.
Yeah. It's funny because immediately after Hoagie comes up in a new non-drag disguise, which is
far
noticeably
worse.
Lower effort. We know where Hoagie's priorities lie.
Could estrogen have saved for Heather?
Yeah, could estrogen have saved? Could estrogene saved her? Because that's how it would be spelled on Doc Terminus's bottle.
That's more or less the song. The townspeople believe them now. They're giving them money.
Yeah, they're like, oh, actually, Doc Terminus is great. I trust him with my life, says one of these townsfolk. And they're all prepared to give $1.
And then we cut.
Before we get into that, we cut to Lampy and Nora back at the lighthouse. And they're kind of having a conversation. She's talking about her fiance who was lost at sea and how she's still kind of holding out hope for him. And she thanks her dad for playing along with Pete's fantasy. And the dad is very insistent. Lampy's like, it's not a fantasy. I saw a dragon. I know what I saw, Nora. And she chastises him and also says like something like, oh, it's nice that like Pete has like a fantasy like that. He's like, I think we might need to be more realistic for him. And Lampy says something that, in my opinion, is really unkind, because he says, well, he basically says, well, you still think that your fiance is going to come back from being lost at sea for a year, so which one of us isn't being realistic? He immediately apologizes to his credit, but it's like a really fast apology, and then he immediately goes, I'm going to go to the hardware store, and leaves.
Mean to her.
Mean to her. And this kind of gets Nora in her feelings, so she goes to the top of the lighthouse, and now
we have
Diana.
My favorite sequence in any movie ever, I think.
Yep.
This is Candle in the Water, Oscar-nominated song. They filmed this. We get a couple of seconds to she's kind of walking along the little apron of the lighthouse.
Yeah.
And then there is a shot. It starts from very far away,
Mm-hmm.
and for nearly 2 minutes, it is just this slow zoom,
Yeah.
slowly coming up on Nora.
Yeah.
No
One
other
minute,
choreography.
1 minute and 47-second shot of just a really slow push in on Nora as she is standing still center frame singing this song.
Like, I get what they're doing with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's at a lighthouse, which is effectively
Right.
like a candle on the water. And, she's the guiding beam in Pete's life now, right? It's a
Right.
beautiful sentiment and honestly gorgeous song. Great. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
This shot is so funny.
Yeah, it's
Nothing.
really funny.
It's just, and it's one of those things where it kind of has to be pointed out to you. Like, I didn't think it was funny for years, and then someone was like, that's the dumbest thing they could have done. They're just zooming in on her from how
Yeah.
far away?
I
Illegal.
remember going into this scene and you said there's going to be a shot they hold on for way too long. And I was like, okay. And as it was happening, I kind of started to lose my mind a little because I was watching it and like 30 seconds in, I was like, okay, they're gonna cut now, right? And it just kept going. It was really funny.
This movie is foundational to my sense of comedy, well and truly.
Yeah, I speculate that it's probably shot like this because this is kind of the only shot they could get away with because there's not a lot of room up on that lighthouse. Cameras were big and heavy back then.
Yeah, but they do other shots in the movie. Like, there's a sequence that we're going to talk about later where there's a whole bit where they're cleaning the lens of the lighthouse, and they're doing a lot of dynamic shots there. Like,
Yeah, I don't
could have done
know.
any. Also, if you can zoom in that far and it looks fine, you can just zoom in and move the camera and tracker. It's all good. You know what? No, you couldn't have done anything else. This is a perfect shot. I love this shot.
Yeah,
Every
perfect
shot in the
shot.
movie should have looked like this, actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
but after this scene, this is where Elliot, we see him in the cave. He has new clothes on. He looks like a little mail
Well, no,
delivery man.
hang on. You got a little confused. First of all, Elliot doesn't wear clothes. That's Pete,
Sorry.
and they've dressed him up like a milkman.
That's right. I apologize.
He is dressed like a little milkman. He's in like a slightly off-white suit with a cap and a black bow tie and black boots that go up to his shins. And he is so excited about these new clothes that he goes running out to the beach to show Elliot. And he also takes with him a photograph of Nora's fiance.
Yes, and this is where he explicitly asks Elliot to find Paul.
This is interesting because he says, like, okay, he doesn't tell Elliot to go out and look for Paul. He tells Elliot to concentrate really hard on finding Paul. And Elliot starts to do this literally. Like, you see him staring at the photo and kind of making really hard thinking faces. And also, there's an earlier line where Pete implies that Elliot is, like, omniscient, or at the very
Yeah,
least, able to, like, expand his consciousness out to know things that are going on in the world.
yeah, Heather. Elliot knows things.
Elliot knows things.
But what he doesn't seem to know is that in the bar, we're back in the bar
Uh-huh.
where good things happen, because the scene's
Yes.
great. Doc
The
Terminus and Hoagie
yeah.
are seeing to a patient
Yeah. The
within the
good
bar.
doctor and his husband are arguing.
Well, they're not. Oh, yeah, I guess they're arguing. Hoagie
Yeah,
not very coherently. He's fucking smashed.
yeah, Hoagie is smashed, and Doc Terminus is lamenting about how this town full of yokels is not making them much money.
Also, this is where we learn why their wagon has sails. It's
Yeah,
because the horses were sold to settle a malpractice suit. The jokes in this movie are so good.
yeah. No, Doc Terminus specifically is really fucking funny. This scene, I wish I'd taken more notes on it.
Same.
Because it was really funny, and I can't remember all the specific bits in it. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, it's...
It's Honestly, I'm gonna say it right now. I think people should watch this movie. I think you should watch this movie and find the bits for yourself.
There is one bit that they actually do something funny with the Passamaquoddy pronunciation bit, where Hoagie is completely like wasted, but he is still like impulsively correcting Doc Terminus every time he doesn't say it right. And this ultimately culminates to a point where Lampy comes in and he is trying to convince people to come see the dragon with him. And because Hoagie is just as white girl wasted as as Lampy, he agrees. He's like, I want to see the dragon.
I'll see the dragon.
I want to see the dragon. And Lampy is like, okay. Doc Terminus implies that he's gonna go sleep with a pretty girl while they're doing this.
They have an
He's
open
like,
relationship.
yeah, he's like, I'm gonna go tend to a girl looking into a nursing career. Because that's what that is. That's what they're implying there. It's a joke for the adults.
It's a joke for us.
Yeah, but Lampy is kind of trying to talk up this dragon, and he's explaining to Hoagie, no, this dragon's really, really frightening. He's 50 feet tall, he's got claws and all that. He's going into that spiel, and he says, let's have some liquid courage before we go, and we're also gonna have to climb some rocks. So here's one drink for the rocks, and they drink their whiskey, and he goes, one for the scary, and Hoagie instinctively goes, quaddy.
These two men go out on the beach. Fun bit of background information from the documentary on the DVD. Mickey, Rudy, and Red Buttons, again, comedians. They know each other, like, outside of this movie, right? And because they're comedians, they love to try to one-up each other while doing bits. So they are stumbling down this beach. They're eating this scene for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert. And apparently when they first had the cut of this scene, it was 20 minutes long of them stumbling down the beach. And each time they filmed it, they got it down like 15, 10, 5 minutes, like down to like however long they got it to be in the actual movie. I'm always delighted when I hear shit like that. Comedians are so fun.
That's great. They've got great chemistry too.
They do.
Yeah.
I write in my notes that these two mentioned kiss.
Yeah, they go into the cave because Hoagie specifically wants to pet the dragon. And Lampy is like, sure, man, go for it, dog.
But he's also, like, describing the dragon and how scary he is. And of course, the dragon is here.
Yeah, Elliot, not realizing they are referring to him, because Elliot is nothing like how they're describing, thinks there is a bigger, scarier dragon in this cave, and starts to freak out. He puts his hand on Hoagie's shoulder, and Hoagie, completely off his ass drunk, turns around, gently pats Elliot's hand and goes, you stay close to me. They take 2 steps, and he starts screaming because, oh god, it's got me.
It's got me. And then, of course, this freaks out Lampy and also Elliot, who then turns and sees his own shadow and loses his goddamn mind.
Yeah, so they're all freaking out, and Lampy, in an attempt to defuse the situation, greets Elliot by name. Elliot, confused, kind of greets him back, and Lampy, seeing an opportunity to, de-escalate, tells Hoagie to, quote, do something so he likes you. To which Hoagie passes Elliot a flask of what is certainly whiskey.
And Elliot is, of course, a lightweight. He takes one sip of this and immediately spouts flame at these two motherfuckers.
A dragon-sized sip, to be fair, because he does down the entire rest of whatever's in the flask. But yeah, so Elliot swallows and basically explodes. He cartoon spicy foods that shit. Lampy and Hoagie run out of the cave screaming. Hoagie runs straight back to Doc Terminus and is like, motherfucker, I just spotted a dragon.
I have seen a dragon. Dr. Terminus does not believe him and basically tells him to shut his mouth. They have a marital trouble scene.
Yeah, we have a little bit of trouble in paradise here, where
Damn.
he doesn't believe Hoagie and then says, really meanly, you know what I just realized? I can't stand you sober either.
Oh my god, this is so sad.
Hurtful, mean to him.
It's so sad to see a marriage break up like this.
Yeah, it's so sad. We cut to the next day where Pete is complaining about having to go to school. Nora basically says, hey, do you want to end up stupid like the people you used to live with? And he goes, no.
No. She gets him dressed up all nice and walks him to school. This is the moment where Nora is quizzing him about
Yeah.
presumably basic knowledge, and we find out, oh, he can do math. He has some knowledge of the world. Obviously, he can read, which,
Yeah.
as you pointed out, kind of an interesting depiction for an orphan child with no other background. Like, we never get a mention of parents. We never know why or how he was orphaned.
Yeah.
It's this character has character, like being built, but it's secret. We can't really see it.
It's
We just get to
secret.
wonder about it.
We also learn that Pete is transphobic because
That's right.
kids come up to him and they're like, oh, you're the kid with the dragon, right? And he's like, yeah. And a girl says, is it a he dragon or a she dragon? And Pete goes, you can't name a girl Elliot. And you know
Yeah.
what? Fuck you, kid.
Fuck you, Pete.
You're a child. You don't know better. It's the 1910s or whatever the fuck.
This serves to lead into the song There's Room for Everyone. It's mostly sung by Nora with some background from the kids. It's just a song about how we can be friends with people who are different from us.
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z.
It's a nice
Yeah.
little song.
We lead into a far more important moment, though, where
Uh-huh.
Nora takes Pete up to go into the school and has a bit of a back and forth with the teacher.
Yeah,
These
Nora
two women have had
teases the
sex.
teacher. Yeah, I was gonna lead into that, but you're just coming out and saying it. These two have that kind of they have history banter going on.
They really do. Nora
Yeah.
teases her about the fact that she repeats words. It's
Yeah.
charming.
And the teacher uncharacteristically gives like a little smile to this when Nora starts to walk away.
Yeah.
You know, these women should kiss. These women should
These women
have
should
kissed and
kiss.
should continue to kiss.
But then that's
Yeah.
immediately ruined because you learn very quickly that the teacher kind of sucks, actually, because Elliot appears at the school and starts fucking around with the school bell.
Elliot
And-
continues to fuck up this kid's life.
He continues to fuck around. Pete goes out to stop him. And despite the fact that the bell was ringing before he went out to stop it, the teacher is immediately like, oh, you're doing that? You're doing that, and now you're gonna get corporeally punished. So she can actually go fuck herself. I don't want her to kiss Nora now.
Yeah, she
You can
says,
go
you're getting the
away."
knuckle cracker, and she starts hitting him in the hands with a yardstick, and as we established earlier, Elliot does not fuck around with this shit.
No.
As she is doing that, and she fucking puts him in the dunce cap and makes him stand in the corner, Elliot pulls out the chair from under the teacher. Pete tries to, like, stop him, so his hands end up on the chair when she takes a spill, and she says, well, now I'm gonna hit you in the butt with this yardstick. And before she could do that, Elliot Kool-Aid Mans into the school, invisible. We just see his silhouette hole explode from the wall, and he's suddenly in the school, and shit's flying everywhere. People are freaking out. He gets in between Elliot and the teacher and says, Elliot, you're going about this the wrong way. You gotta get out of here. And Elliot leaves through a different wall of the school, so now there's two holes here.
They accomplished this effect because we talked about this, so I wanted to reveal it for you.
Uh-huh.
They had like the cutout already done and then effectively just covered it over, made it look nice, and then attached everything to wires and just pulled that for the effect. Same with like all the chairs being pushed backwards, and for like the dust effects, it was just like some loose mortar and brick.
Oh, that's
It's a good
fun.
effect. It looks great.
Yeah, I love shit like that. They did get really creative with him being invisible and still having to interact with the environment.
This incident, of course, means that the teacher is, and all of the kids are more or less clued into the fact that, yeah, hey, maybe a dragon exists. Like, there's no way the child could have done that.
She starts telling the town, and the town is now clued in on this. And because the town is clued in on this, Hoagie gets to gloat to Dr. Terminus. He just keeps going, I told you. And
Yeah.
Dr. Terminus immediately starts seeing dollar signs.
We get the song Every Little Piece, which is a song about killing the dragon and taking it apart.
Yeah, he brings up like an alchemical tome and starts singing about how he is going to grind Elliot up for alchemical reagents. Like,
Yeah,
dragon hearts will make you immortal, dragon scales will cure baldness. Like, shit like that. He's basically saying, I could make so much snake oil out of this beast.
I can do so much with it. It also leads to a recurring musical stinger bit where Doc Terminus sings about, can't you hear that jingle jangle sound? Hoagie joins in and harmonizes with him by going, oh yeah. And it's great every time.
It's great. They do a little, like, vaudeville tap dancing bit on the stage of their cart, singing about how
Where
they're
it's
going to get
nighttime now.
stocks. Yeah, where it's nighttime now. They're just doing this for them. They're not performing
Yeah.
for anyone but them. They're talking about how they're going to get stocks and bonds and capital and all that. They're so excited about getting all these parts from this beast.
Yeah, so they head off towards the lighthouse. And Doc T, when introducing himself,
Well, yeah, before Doc T shows up, we get the establishing shot of Pete being dog shit at painting because they're trying to paint the lighthouse. That brush is not even touching the wall with what Pete's doing. He's just moving his arm up and down.
he's just flailing. That's not how you whitewash Peter.
Yeah.
Doc Terminus, in introducing himself to Pete, refers to Hoagie as his intern. No, he
Yeah.
is not.
He's not.
And he is asking to buy Elliot from Pete. He specifically offers him $5 for his dragon.
Well, not just that, he offers him $5 and HRT in exchange for his dragon because he also promises Pete medicine that will induce puberty, which is, hey, that's what HRT is. And
Yeah.
I'm going to establish this here because I'm not a fucking coward. I think anyone, including children, who wants and needs HRT should have access to it. In this
Yeah.
case, it's a bad thing because Dr. Terminus is a quack who doesn't have a medical license. And
Yeah,
Pete is
don't
also not transgender.
Pete, don't take the HRT. Your penis is gonna fall off in a bad way.
Yeah, you're gonna get the reefer madness or whatever the fuck they're saying about it now.
Notably, Pete, of course, turns down this offer. He does not believe in owning people. He says outright, I don't own Elliot. I also think this is funny because it is less than the Gogans paid for Pete.
Yeah, they paid $50 plus fees. Pete, know what you're worth.
Know what you're worth, Pete. They do give in, and they go to show Dr. Terminus and Hoagie where Elliot is, and they point to a point on the beach.
Like, oh yeah,
And-
he's down there.
Dr. Terminus is like, I don't see him. And Pete does say, that's because he's invisible today, and I like that joke.
Yeah, him and Nora both laugh at them. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Get the
Nora,
fuck out of here,
to her,
assholes.
weirdly, I guess the news hasn't reached Nora, despite it being the next day, because Nora is still not privy to the fact that this dragon is fucking real. She thinks these two men are trying to run a con on this boy who doesn't know better. She immediately steps in and is like, Elliot, or not Elliot, sorry. I'm doing it now because of you. You did this to me. Just,
Yay.
Pete, whatever the fuck these men are saying to you, don't listen to them. Don't talk to them. They're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. As soon as she gets the opportunity to fuck with these men along with Pete, she starts to, because she also sends Pete inside to blow
For
the
some
foghorn. Because Doc Terminus and Hoagie are standing in front of it singing about, they're doing a little reprise of Every Little Piece. And as Hoagie goes into the oh yeah, the foghorn blasts behind them, and the T now stands for tinnitus in Doc T.
These men do not have eardrums anymore. They've been obliterated. They don't exist.
Yeah, but they're not the only people who heard that horn, because Lampy sits bolt upright because he actually takes his job fucking seriously and runs out in a panic demanding to know where the fog is coming from.
They assure him it's all good. But now that Lampy is here, Nora takes this opportunity to extend the offer to Pete to stay with them forever. And
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
It's
Right.
really sweet. It's really sweet that they're like, yeah, we think it's time for you to stop running. It's funny because as this is happening, Lampy is absolutely Tom Sawyering the shit out of Pete because he's supposed to be helping paint the lighthouse too. But he's like, oh no, but Pete, you gotta do it like this. And Pete's like, this is the best day of my life ever. And Lampy kind of looks at Nora like, you gotta take this away from the kid?
This, of course, leads into one of the more, I think, popular, well-known songs from the movie, Brazzle Dazzle Day. It's just a scene where they're singing about how great it is. Oh, clearly nothing bad will happen now because it's a Brazzle Dazzle Day. Nothing bad will ever happen again. We're painting a lighthouse. We're doing a dance. We're having so much fun.
And it's so easy to have so much fun. Anyway, the Gogans come into town.
Anyway, the Gogans are bit. The Gogans are bit? What? Who bit
The Gogans are doing a bit where they want to reacquire this orphan slave.
The Gogans are here. Everybody is aware of it because they're loud and they smell, I guess. Yeah. Doc Terminus specifically comes out of his little wagon and presumably leaves a man to die in a contraption.
Oh yeah, he's got a guy in a fucking saw trap. Like, that's not even an exaggeration. He has a guy hooked up to a device that is holding his jaw open with a series of pulleys and a big ass, like, iron weight on the end of the pulley, and these metal forceps that are just in his mouth.
Presumably to pull a tooth.
Yeah, to do dental work, I guess. But Doc Terminus, like, hears the commotion outside and hands the guy, like, the, like, handle, and he says, okay. No, he's like, here,
it's
keep your foot
pedal.
Yeah, keep your foot on that pedal. If you don't, that weight's gonna fall, and guess what's gonna happen. And he leaves, and I'm losing my shit because it's literally a reverse bear trap. He's like, hello, milkman. I want to play a game. You always make your deliveries on time.
You never make your deliveries on time.
You never make your deliveries on time. But now, time is not on your side. In front of you is a foot pedal. It's
Leave
really
your fucking foot
funny.
on it or die.
Yeah. But yeah, we never see that man again.
He's dead.
And Dr. Terminus never goes back into that wagon.
The Gogans are here now. They call back to the beginning of the movie where we first see them popping up from behind, like, trees and such. They do it again, but now we're on the harbor that turns out it isn't real. They are filthy. They're, like, hitting each other on the back, and dust is flying up everywhere. They threaten to sexually assault people. Cool. And that leads us into the song Bill of Sale, where they're just reiterating that they want to take Pete back because they purchased him.
We legally own this child.
And we want to use him as a slave. That is what they want. And Nora, because she's based, is like, you can't have him because you don't fucking love him. I love him. I love this boy I met 3 days ago. He's mine now. Yeah. You can't have him.
Nora is just straight up telling these people, go fuck yourselves. No, I'll see you in court. Yeah. Nora is so cool. The Gogans chase them onto the water, because they're, like, in a boat. Lampy and them are, like, all fishing together or something. As the Gogans chase them onto the water, like, waving the paper saying, we've got a bill of sale, Elliot enters the water, swims up to them like a fucking torpedo, and blows them into the air.
He blows up their boat.
He blows up their fucking boat and they land in the water. Nora, for some reason, still does not believe in the dragon after this scene, where she clearly sees some fucking wild shit happen.
And neither do the Gogans, because the next time we see them, they're in a bar, and Doc Terminus approaches them. They're still soaking wet. Moss specifically is like, I'm gonna catch a chill, and it's like, good, die. He offers to help the Gogans get Pete back by recruiting them to capture Elliot, and they kind of laugh him off, but they accept his help because they want to get the boy.
I was confused at this scene, because I couldn't tell if they were laughing in a, oh yeah, good luck, buddy, sort of way of, you're not gonna get that fucking dragon, because they have literally dealt with him. Like, we see Elliot, knock them over, physically, like, attack them early on in the movie, and it is implied that Pete running away and Elliot defending him is a regular occurrence.
Yeah.
But no, what they mean is, oh yeah, you actually believe in that dragon bullshit, because the Gogans are somehow dumber than these townspeople.
My headcanon for the Gogans is that they firmly believe that Pete has, like, god powers, and that's why they want him back so much. So whenever he, flips them in the air and throws them in mud and in the water and explodes their boat. That's him doing that.
Yeah, Pete
But,
is a psychic
maybe he gets
child.
tired sometimes. Yeah, he gets tired sometimes. He's a Stephen King psychic child.
Yeah, he's got the shine.
He's got the shine. Dr. Terminus recruiting the Gogans is just part of his plan. He also goes out to recruit the townies and brings up something that hasn't really been part of the plot before when he says, hey, the fish are all gone. You know what's causing the fish to all be gone? The stupid dragon. Help me capture the dragon. The fish will come back.
I think the townsfolk complain about the fish being gone right before the song Nora sings about everyone deserving to be welcomed, because what they do is they blame Pete, because they don't believe in the dragon at this point. They blame Pete. They think Pete is like some kind of jinx.
Yeah. He's a psychic child. The townsfolk for a certain amount of time also believe that Pete has psychic powers, that he also has
or at the
shine.
very least believe that he is some kind of hexed being. Some kind of curse has been laid upon him and it's spreading through the town.
Damn, Pete. Yeah. So anyway, he recruits the townies, and then instantly we cut to them preparing a trap for Elliot the dragon. Yeah. They're carrying a big beam. Once again, it
Not
feels
a beam,
very...
a giant roll of net.
That's right. Once again, feels very... Look at this net that I just found. Once again, feels very Beauty and the Beast, like the villagers stamping through the woods, gonna break into Beast Castle. But instead, they're setting up in, I think, the bar. If not the bar itself, it's like a... I think it's a reset.
No, I think what it is, I think it's like a shipbuilding warehouse. I think that's what it is. Yeah. And
to finalize his trap, Dr. Terminus runs to the lighthouse to find Pete, tells him, oh, Elliot is in the town, he's wreaking havoc. And without a thought, Pete is like, oh man, and like gives Doc Terminus what he was holding. Doc Terminus immediately rolls his eyes and throws it on the ground and follows him. Great bit.
I want to say also, before he gets Pete, he has a townsman fetch him a harpoon cannon.
That's right.
Because they are going to shoot Elliot dead.
They're going to shoot him dead. And I also forgot, before Doc Terminus comes to get Pete at the lighthouse is met by Elliot, who has come from a long way away. He says something that we don't understand, but Pete does. And Pete goes and tells Nora, Elliot has found Paul. And this is the moment where...
And Paul's gonna come back.
And this is the moment when Nora says, you need to stop having these childish fantasies. Elliot does not exist, and Paul is dead. He died in a shipwreck.
Whoa, the Beatles.
And to his credit, Pete is not like... He doesn't like throw a temper tantrum, but this kid's fairly mature. They definitely... Yeah. He's believable as a child, for sure. He has a believable child affectation, but he's also, like, we never see him throw a temper tantrum. We never see him get overly upset at things.
Yeah.
And so he says, basically, well, we'll see. Like, he doesn't get mad at her. And I don't know, I kind of like that.
He's clearly upset that he's not believed by someone he cares deeply about, but he also doesn't get angry with her.
Yeah.
Doc Terminus leads Pete back into the warehouse where the trap is getting set up, and as they walk in, Doc Terminus looks up, and the entire town is tangled in this net on the ceiling.
Look at this net. It's full of men.
He left them for like half an hour to walk up to that lighthouse and come back, and they have fucked the entire thing sideways.
The townies in this movie are comedically dumb.
Yeah, Doc Terminus is like, well, fuck it, and just bag the child.
Yeah.
They put him in a sack.
No wonder your fishing is going so poorly. You don't know how to fucking use nets. This is also the moment that we see out on the water. There is, in fact, a boat with Paul on it.
Yeah, Paul and some other guy.
Paul and some other guy who doesn't matter. It's storming. It's very rough waters. This is where the Minotaur comes in because the wave is crashing up against the lighthouse as they're coming to shore. And then the waves crash so high that they leap up into the top part of the lighthouse and put out the flame. And so now as these two men are coming to shore, they no longer know where the lighthouse is.
They're like, oh, right? Fuck. We can't
Ugh.
see the rocks anymore.
Also, the chroma keying is really bad. It's real bad with this boat. It keeps like fading in and out over the scene. It's great.
Yeah.
Doc Terminus, with his plan to use Pete as bait, sends his husband to go lure Elliot with
Yeah.
the explanation, he likes you.
Yeah, he
And
likes you.
also,
You gave him whiskey.
he likes you, gave him whiskey. Also, if you don't do it, you're a fucking coward. And I know better. You can't be a coward anymore. So go get him, you fucking coward.
Yeah.
Hoagie's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, he
And
goes to the cave. He says, Elliot, the Gogans, they grabbed Pete, and Elliot locks the fuck in.
he gets scary for the first time in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think they do a great job with him because his design is so soft and rounded and friend-shaped, literally,
Yeah.
that you wouldn't expect him to be able to look frightening. He looks scary.
Yeah. I can see why Lampy might be frightened of this beast.
Yeah, so he goes to save Elliot. Save Elliot? Jesus fucking Christ, Heather.
How do you keep doing this?
Because it's two boy names that end in T.
The apostrophe S in Pete's Dragon is not a contraction. It's a possessive. It's not Pete is Dragon. No,
Pete
the
is
dragon is Elliot. Pete is the boy.
I am Dragon.
No, we're watching that later.
Oh, okay. Spoilers. Elliot goes to save Pete. He barges in maybe not invisible. The lights are off when he goes into the warehouse.
He does barge in invisible.
Okay, that's what it is. And they drop the net on him. Look at this net. And very cool, the lights come up and there is clearly now a big mechanical rig beneath this net that's moving around. I love this.
There is a giant dragon-shaped animatronic underneath this net, or at least the guts of one, moving around, because we never see it fully, but it's great. It's great. Right before the net gets dropped, Pete yells that it's a trap, but oh no, too late.
Hoagie's also stuck under the net. Dr. Terminus rescues him.
It saves his husband.
Pete is in a damn sack.
Yeah, the Gogans get ready to Gogon out of there.
They get ready to go gadget out of here.
Yeah.
And this is about the time that Elliot manages to throw off the net, and everyone sees him. He's fully visible. He's being scary. He's fucking shit up.
Yeah, no net can hold Elliot.
No net can hold Elliot when he's here to rescue his friend. Dr. Terminus and Hoagie are trying to line up the shot with the harpoon as Elliot is concentrated on getting Pete back. And they kind of get forgotten for a second so we can wrap up the Gogan plot because he catches up to them. They're trying to ride away in a cart. And because Elliot's tail is basically a fifth appendage, it has like a little hand attached to the back of it. He frees Pete, picks him up, scares the Gogans, they fall in more goo, and Ma, in trying to stop him from taking Pete, is like, I have the bill of sale right here, I paid $50, you can't have him. Elliot sets it on fire.
Yep.
Good moment.
Yeah.
Why didn't he do that earlier? Probably because they didn't have it on hand. I'm not cinema sensing this movie, it's for kids. It's fine.
Yeah,
it doesn't
ding,
matter.
who give a shit?
Ding, who give a shit, not us.
Yeah.
But they're covered in goo once again, and they sped up run towards the wagon as a horse drags it away. They're gone.
They're gone.
Wagon, horse.
Yeah.
I speak good. Yeah, so the Gogans are out of the movie, but oh no, Dr. Terminus still has a harpoon.
Yeah,
oh no.
He is trying to, line this shot up. There's a back and forth of him and Hoagie kind of pushing it up and down, because they're trying to, aim it, I guess. But it fires off. It does not hit Elliot, but as it's going, Dr. Terminus looks down and realizes, oh no, I'm about to get Captain Ahab'd. Because the ropes are coiling around and his foot is right in the middle of that coil. And as it pulls taut, he gets Captain Ahab'd and dragged by that harpoon out into the night. And
it is accompanied by the goofy yell, which is very fun,
yeah,
I think.
The literal goofy yell. The woo-hoo-hoo! That one.
Now Dr. Terminus is hung upside down like a hanging man. He's been
Like
put
the
here
Hanged
to
Man Tarot. He's
like the
enlightened.
hanged man. Yeah, he's becoming enlightened. He tries to cut a deal with Elliot, and Elliot pretends to think on it and then makes a goofy face and scares the shit out of Hoagie.
Yeah, he asks Elliot if he would be willing to donate his body to science for a modest fee, and Elliot says no.
Elliot says no. And to cap off the last bit with the townies and more or less resolve his conflict with them, the mayor is stepping out of his house. He makes sure the porch is still there. He's got his cigar stub. But oh shit, there's a storm, and the electrical pole, sparking cartoon lightning, begins to fall towards him. Elliot saves his life. He grabs it before it can and shoves it back up. And therefore, we have resolved all conflict with townies. We're all good now. We're friends. Now we have to go save Paul, because Jesus fucking Christ, somehow this movie has four, actually more like five plots that we need to resolve. Great, fantastic.
Yeah.
Using Bumblebee logic, he is able to take to the air, and Pete rides him. They fly to the lighthouse, which is being pelted by rainwater at this point, and we discover Lampy is unable to light it because even though he replaced the wick, it's still very wet, and so he can't, like, strike a flame. And so Elliot does his best to kind of shimmy his way into the lighthouse, but because he is a big paunchy dragon, he gets stuck and is unable to produce flame.
Yeah.
There's a bit of tension. Oh no, is he
Yeah.
gonna be able to do it?
This is where, Nora realizes, oh shit, the dragon's real.
Oh shit, the dragon's real. Very funny shot of Nora through a kind of funhouse mirror-looking pane of glass where her face is all stretched out.
Yeah, and we barely recognize her.
And we barely recognize her. Unlike that movie, I think this movie is doing it on purpose. Because this movie
definitely.
does Elliot ultimately able to light the flame. Yay, the lighthouse is now aglow. Paul and his buddy can presumably make it back to the rocks. Nora...
Well, no, they don't want to make it back to the rocks.
Oh, sorry, not make it back. They're gonna
That's the opposite of what they want. Yeah, they want to. The lighthouse comes on, and they're like, "Oh fuck, the rocks are right there. We gotta go."
Why did we turn the boat when we can still see? And in a kind of weird moment that I don't like, Nora sachets up to Elliot to thank him for saving the day and plants a kiss on his face, and he poofs. He disappears. Implying something. There's an implication there.
He's embarrassed. That's what the implication is. He's flustered.
Oh yeah, you're so right. That's
we cut to the next day where not only has the storm passed, the whole town is celebrating Elliot and his heroism, and they're also celebrating a massive haul of fish, which they credit to Elliot. They say Elliot has brought the fish back, and he also saved the ship from being wrecked by the storm, and we think he is cool and based now.
Yeah. It's a reprise for I Saw a Dragon, wherein the townies forget that just last night they tried to kill this dragon.
Kill this dragon and were almost accessory to human trafficking.
And like you said, the ship was saved, so Paul is now here.
Yeah, he's yelling for Nora on the docks.
Yep. They share a chaste little hug. As it turns out, Paul got hit over the head and forgot who he was for a year, and then it is implied that when Elliot found him, Elliot smacked him upside the head again in order to make him remember, which I think is great. What a funny way of doing that.
What a funny way of doing that.
Our last song of the movie is Brazzle Dazzle Day, again as a reprise. And Pete, Lampy, Nora, and Paul are all singing it together, running up to the lighthouse, doing a bit of a dance. And then Elliot comes down and speaks to Pete, and we learn that Elliot has to go now. There is another child in need of his help, and so although they will always be friends, he has duty elsewhere.
Yeah. This is reminding me that you said his name originally was going to be Gabriel, which kind of makes me associate this with like a guardian angel type of thing.
I didn't get a chance to look up the original story or find any of like the spec scripts for this. I wonder if you're entirely correct and that's what this was going to be.
Yeah, they.
Or like more explicitly, I should say.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting thought to ponder, but that doesn't matter because Elliot gets ready for takeoff. He starts running like a damn cartoon down the field. Goes into takeoff, does like a little loop-de-loop. Paul, Nora, and Lampy join Pete in waving him off. Paul's like, what? Who the fuck is that?
Who the fuck? Hey, who is that?
Oh, and they just turn and go, that's Elliot, silly. I guess nobody told Paul about the dragon while he was on the docks, or he just wasn't listening.
He didn't pay attention when this giant green monstrosity thwacked him upside the head to make him remember his old life.
Well, Elliot might have been invisible at the time, and also that does mean Paul has suffered 2 debilitating head injuries.
Paul's
so
fine.
Maybe
He's got a mustache.
But
and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, Elliot does a loop-de-loop before he turns invisible, and then we get a big, sweeping, zoom-out helicopter shot of, like, the lighthouse as we fly off into the air. The end.
The end.
Yeah. Not bad.
Not bad. I had fun with this one.
Surprisingly not bad, for me, personally.
I think we had a bit of trouble talking about this in some ways because it's pretty decent. Like, it's kind of hard to make fun of a movie that's competent.
Yeah, oh no, we can't riff on this movie as much because it's actually alright. Oh no.
Damn it.
I think we did fine.
I think we did fine. We got into
it. This is a little new for us because this is, like you said, just kind of a competent movie. It's not the best. There are some moments on it that are like a little silly. Generally speaking, it's a Disney movie. They generally know what they're doing, at least, like, for a long time, including the time this was made. They knew what they were doing.
This is, to me, kind of the platonic ideal of a mid-movie where, like, there's bits to enjoy, and I personally would watch it again, but I don't know, like you, I don't know if you would want to watch this movie unless someone, like, asks you to.
Yeah. I'd watch it with you again. It was alright.
Not anytime soon.
Not anytime soon, no.
It's 2 hours long.
It's a long movie, yeah.
It's a little bit too long. But at the same time, I don't necessarily know what I would cut out. It's one of those, Yeah. Everything makes sense. Also, my butt hurts and I want to get up and do anything else.
Fair. Well, before you get up from butt hurt, Diana, we've got a job to do.
We have a fucking job to do, Heather, and I'm so excited to do it.
That's right. It's time to roll out our spreadsheets and our spectacles as we examine this movie and the dragon in it to rate them on the Dragonspotting Dragon Scale. Numerical and quantifiable and entirely arbitrary system we have developed to rate and score the dragons in the media we watch and interact with.
And we are not going to explain it at all this time.
Well,
I'll say, when we get to each category.
Go back, listen to the first episode. Hell, listen to the last 3. We give a pretty decent explanation, but we're gonna just get right into it. We have 5 categories, as always. Taxonomy, elegance, terror, prominence, and effectiveness, plus a bonus category if we're feeling spicy. Diana, why don't you start us off with the taxonomy score?
Taxonomy. Heather, once again, this is a dragon.
This is a dragon, but honestly, I think the way Pete describes this beast as being both fish and mammal with head of camel, neck of crocodile, he's kind of chimeric with it. He could be anything.
Heather, they call
10 out of 10.
If we gave Devin and Cornwall a 10 out of 10, we have to give Pete a 10 out of 10.
Well, those guys are definitively reptiles. They refer to themselves as such. This thing is a fish and a mammal. I don't know what Pete's dragon is.
Okay, well, maybe some dragons are. We are not arbiters of what dragons actually are.
What
We've never seen one in real life.
What do you mean? We have the scale.
Okay, and I'm saying this is a 10 out of 10.
All right. Okay. 10 out of
Elegance?
10. Elegance, this is a low score. This is a
I
low
want
score.
I was gonna say like a 1 or a 2.
Yeah, I agree with 1 or a 2. I'll say 1 with you, because Elliot's not elegant. He's clumsy. He's bumbling.
He's
It's kind of the
he's
entire point.
he's deliberately designed that way.
All right.
You can't be mad at us for saying he's got an elegance of 1.
Yeah. Terror. I'm gonna say I'm feeling like a 6.
I was
in
gonna
that
say 6 too. Yeah.
he's generally pretty friendly. He's, you said he's friend-shaped. He's got... Sorry, I just remember the part where he turns all his limbs and head invisible and he looks like a fucking pear. But yeah, no, Elliot's funny. He's goofy. He can be scary when he wants to be, but he so rarely wants to be that I think it kind of diminishes the overall terror of him.
And that's okay. Like
Yeah.
this might turn out to be a bit of a lower score, but unlike with Devin and Cornwall, it's not because we fucking hate those guys and they're a miserable excuse of a creative being, but
Yeah.
because he is designed in a specific way where he's just not going to match up with our categories to a certain extent.
Yeah. And I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Because we've also got prominence and effectiveness in here. So,
Yeah.
prominence. He's pretty present, I would say, as a device. He's constantly brought up in conversation. He
is a
appears
character.
alongside Pete, but
Yeah.
he is invisible throughout most of it and does spend a good chunk of the movie in a cave.
But even invisible, he's there. And I would argue for that being just as important as when you see him, because as they talked about in developing this movie, they wanted you to feel him even when...
Yeah.
Wait. What am I saying? They wanted you to feel his presence.
Yeah. I got that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm feeling a 7.
I was gonna say 6 or 7.
Yeah, I'm feeling a 7 just because, he's
I
around.
want to boost his score. Yeah.
He's got a presence. And the point you made with him being invisible, yeah, even though he's invisible, they do a damn fine job of making you know he's still there.
Yeah, even when he's not invisible but still on screen, they're talking about him. Like, he's a big part of the movie. The movie is named after him, and they're right for that,
Yeah. All right. Effectiveness.
I want to give this a high score.
Yeah, I'm feeling this too because Elliot does fucking push this plot along, and he's got feats. He's got feats in this film.
He also accomplishes more or less exactly what they set out to do with him. Like, when you listen to what their concept was for creating this guy. Yes, he gets a little bit annoying with the voice acting, but I don't know. I can kind of look past that for the most part. I was going to say an 8 or a 9.
I was feeling an 8 too.
Okay.
So we're going to say 8. And that would leave Elliot with a total score of 6.8. However, Diana, I personally need to correct a wrong.
Uh-huh.
I would like to give Elliot the Dragon 1 mea culpa point for judging him so harshly for so long.
I agree with that, and for my reasoning, it's because I loved this movie as a kid, and I still find it enormously charming. So,
mea culpa, friend Elliot. I was wrong. I have learned to love again.
No need to write the I hate or M hate speech in your notebook again.
My ire has been redirected entirely to a different dragon. You're all right.
and with
that leaves us with do you want to announce the final number?
Elliot the Dragon from Pete's Dragon is coming out with a 7.8.
Congratulations, Elliot from Pete's Dragon. We're gonna drop you into the ranking here. We have locked in the score, and we're gonna sort now. Elliot from Pete's Dragon has moved and settled into a pretty impressive 2nd place on our ranking list. Once again, just under Saphira, maintains the number 1 spot, and just above all of the dragons from Dungeons & Dragons 2000 by a narrow margin. eked out for second place there. All the dragons in Dungeons and Dragons 2000 having a collective score of 7.025. So pretty close. I've been Heather.
And I've been Diana, and will continue to be.
And we'll spot you later, and we'll be your candle on the water for when you come back next week.
Aye, aye.
Have a
Thank you so much for
wonderful,
listening.
have a wonderful time. Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye
Bye. Bye. I have to stop the recording. Bye.
now.